It is 8 o'clock. The polls have closed in cities and towns across Saskatchewan. And if you are still in the line, though, stay right where you are. As long as you were there by 8 o'clock, by right now, you'll still get to vote. And soon, it'll be time to find out who has been elected, re-elected, or who will go down in defeat. It is an evening that will see the election of mayors, councillors, reeves, and school board trustees in over 500 communities across the province. And it all starts right now. Good evening and welcome to Saskatchewan Decides 2024. I'm Ethan Williams in Regina. We are streaming this civic election results special on our CBC Saskatchewan websites and the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel and our brand new CBC News Saskatchewan Fast channel on GEM as well. We're glad you're along for the ride on what is expected to be an exciting night. Will Sandra Masters get a second term as Regina mayor? Who will win the highly contested Saskatoon mayoral race? And who will replace half of city council in each city since so many incumbent councillors are not running for re-election? Well, these answers, plus some special guests along the way, are all part of tonight's program. But first, we'll focus on Saskatoon, and that is where we find the host of CBC Radio Saskatoon Morning, Stephanie Massicotte. She's in our Saskatoon newsroom tonight. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Ethan. There is excitement in Saskatoon as one thing is certain, no matter the outcome, the city will have a new mayor. Charlie Clark, of course, is not seeking re-election, marking the end of his time in office. But we have 5 candidates vying for that top job. Former Saskatoon Mayor Don Aitchison, former City Councillor Cynthia Block, Gordon Wyant, of course, a former Saskatchewan Party MLA. And then we have Carrie Tarasoff, who is running for the second time, and a new name this election, Mike Harder. We will have more information on the candidates in just a moment. But what also makes this election one to watch is the fact we have 5 councillors not seeking re-election. So there will be a handful of new faces in council chambers not seeking re-election. Our Ward 2's Hillary Goff, Ward 3's David Curtin, Ward 6 was Cynthia Block's seat. She, of course, gave that up when she announced her run for mayor. Ward 8's Serena Gersher and Ward 7's Marin Lowen, who actually joins me now and will be with me as we await results. Thank you, Marin, so much for coming down this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Now, as outgoing councillor, what are you watching for tonight as we await results to come in?
Well, of course, we do want to see who is going to make up the balance of those council seats which have been vacated. Of course, we have had a recent election in Saskatchewan which showed quite a bit of change in the cities in this province. And the broader context, I think, of an anti-incumbent sentiment, which is expressing some of the frustrations residents have with inflation and affordability. So it'll be interesting to see how much of that change comes to the cities tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Marin, and she will be with me all night long, so we will have more on that in a bit. And the race for mayor in Saskatoon has certainly been hotly contested. 5 candidates are vying for the top elected spot, as I mentioned, including some pretty familiar faces. Former Saskatoon Mayor Don Aitchison, the city's longest-serving mayor with 4 terms from 2003 to 2016. He's seeking a comeback after losing re-election to Charlie Clark in 2016 and again in 2020. Cynthia Block was elected to Saskatoon City Council in 2016, is running for mayor after 2 terms representing Ward 6. She is a former journalist and 2015 federal Liberal candidate. She would be the city's first female mayor if elected. Gord Wyant is a former Saskatoon City Councillor turned Saskatchewan Party MLA. He represented Ward 5, winning 3 civic elections in 2003, 2006, and 2009 before he resigned to run in the 2010 provincial election. Wyant held a number of portfolios during his 14 years as an MLA. And this is Carrie Tarasoff's second run for mayor, having placed 4th in 2020. A former member of the Canadian military, he has experience in mining, construction, and infrastructure development planning. And our 5th and final candidate is a new face this election, Mike Harder. He was the last candidate to launch his campaign for mayor. There's not a lot of information available about him, but his website promises, quote, "I will put the best interests of all residents of Saskatoon first." So those are the 5 mayoral candidates here in Saskatoon, but we're not just covering tonight's results from the studio. We also have reporters joining us on the ground this evening. We'll start with Charles Hamilton, who is at Saskatoon City Hall, where voting tabulation will take place. Charles, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Stephanie, this is going to be ground zero for tonight's election. The 67 polling stations across the city. Any minute now, they closed just a few minutes ago. Any minute now, they're going to take those tabulators from those polling stations across the city. They're going to drive them down, and just behind me, you might not be able to see yet, but they're getting set up to start counting those votes. And so this will be the place that we get a first look at who's going to win, like you say, not only the open mayor's race, but also those 5 vacant council spots. And we're expecting the votes to come in batches. Probably we're not a live running tally, but probably 3 or 4 big batches. So we'll see how this works out. But the city says so far everything's been going smoothly. There's been no problems at polling stations. So we're hoping to get results here in a few minutes. Stephanie?
Thank you, Charles. CBC's Charles Hamilton live at Saskatoon City Hall tonight. And before some of the candidates eventually make their way to council chambers, some are gathered with family, friends, and supporters. Liam O'Connor has made his way to Gordon Wyant's election night gathering. And Liam, I hear you have a guest with you this evening.
Yes, yeah. The watch party is in full swing here at the Wyant headquarters. And Gord is mingling around, talking to some people. Families here, volunteers are here. And joined with me today is Samantha Yahelnitsky, who is the campaign manager for Gordon Wyant. Samantha, I want to ask you about how you're feeling tonight after this long campaign here.
We are feeling very excited. I love that I can barely hear you in this room. It's 156 days as of today, and we've had a lot of fun. We're just really excited and cautiously optimistic.
And so we know that the provincial election, it happened just a couple weeks ago, and lots of supporters here. But the Sask Party, they lost the seats in the city, and obviously Gordon Wyant, former Sask Party MLA, cabinet minister. How do you think that'll play into the election tonight? Will that affect him, those provincial results, or is the municipal election a whole new ballgame?
I think it's a bit of both, for sure. Gordon has definitely been asked to speak to his record while he was in the government. But we view it, and I think a lot of people in the city view it as an asset, in particular because we've now lost the majority of Sask Party seats in both Saskatoon and Regina. And so for Gordon to be the voice for our city and the biggest city in our province, I think is really important, and really hoping that that's the case.
And what, when you were out campaigning, what was the biggest topic that you saw on the steps there?
Safety in our city, absolutely, hands down, was a constant refrain. People were concerned about their neighborhoods, about downtown. Businesses are facing a lot of challenges with crime and safety. And then we heard a lot about the downtown event and entertainment district, as well as the library. Those were sort of the 3 common themes. And cost of living.
Thank you so much. Good luck, Samantha. This is Samantha Yahelnitsky, the campaign manager for Gord Wyant, and I'm going to send it back to you, Ethan, in the studio there.
Okay, Liam O'Connor at a busy election night gathering for Gord Wyant in Saskatoon. Now, back here in Regina, we are joined by a couple of outgoing councillors of our own to break down the results tonight. Andrew Stevens, the outgoing Ward 3 City Councillor, serving numerous central Regina neighbourhoods, including Cathedral and North Central, and he was elected first in 2016. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
And John Findura is the outgoing Ward 5 City Councillor in Regina, serving several East Regina neighbourhoods, all the way from Glencairn to Windsor Park, and he has served 4 terms on council, first elected in 2009. John, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
John, I'll start with you. What are some of the races that you are going to be keeping an eye on tonight?
Well, first to Ward 5. I'm kind of interested to see who's going to take the reins and go do. I mean, when incumbent is not there, I think the races change, right? So everyone's trying to figure out what that's going to look like or what they want to do. So 5 is interested to me to see who's going to get in there to grab the baton. I would say, give someone a chance. Like sometimes when the incumbent stays a long time, it's not bad, but it's not always good. But give someone else a chance to represent. So give someone else to have a chance to, win and serve the community. So.
And Andrew, what about for you? Are there any races you're looking at?
Yeah, well, I've become very attached to the communities that I've served. So, with Cathedral and downtown, that's going to be still situated in Ward 3, so obviously that will be my first pick. North Central, which I think deserves a great deal of attention, is going to be shifted into Ward 8, so I'm going to be focusing on who gets elected there. They actually have an amazing list of candidates. And then Ward 1, which will take in part of Centre Square downtown. So those are the 3 council seats that I'm really going to be paying attention to. I've done a lot of outreach with folks who have questions about those neighborhoods, anything I could do to help with institutional memory and some background. And then obviously everyone's going to be watching the mayoral race. I think it's a big deal this time. And I can see from the lineups outside the polling stations that residents are very concerned as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's because there are obviously a lot of pressing issues that are affecting people in Regina as well, as we heard from in Saskatoon as well. What do you think is kind of the big pressing issue going forward into this next council term?
Well, I think kind of unfortunately a pool has been the centerpiece, given the fact that this has been on the agenda in some fashion for years now, and we've had successive elections that have approved it and seen it advance. I'd say, for me, obviously, would be inner city revitalization and really important crises that demand our attention. Food insecurity affects people, and that's a matter that we have to deal with at the civic level, whether we like it or not. You saw in Saskatoon questions about crime and safety. That comes back to homelessness, the addictions crisis, and the affordability issues that residents are struggling with, whether you're in an encampment or just struggling to prevent yourself from finding yourself houseless. So I think that is really what needs to be front and center. And frankly, I think the pool has been a bit of a distraction, considering that's just a basic city amenity.
John, do you share those sentiments, or is something else kind of front of mind for you?
No, I think I do, because I think the council should share that sentiment as a whole to really look at the entire city. You are representing a ward, but you are a city councillor, and those issues are not going to just slide away. They're there, need to be dealt with. And there's division on that. There's the individuals that don't want it and the individuals that do want it. But to grow our city, to grow our people, grow the Regina as a population-wise, we need some of those amenities of folks to settle here. So there's a pros and cons for it, but it's bigger pro than not. And that's what I do agree with the sentiment with. You got to build it. I said that at council. Build it, they'll come.
Okay. Build it and they will
Build it,
come.
they come.
There we go.
That's how that works. I mean, nothing else, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know both of you looking at the mayor race as one of the key races tonight in Regina. And our race for mayor here in Regina, well, it's a little bit busier than in Saskatoon. We thought there was a big field in 2020 when 9 candidates ran. This time you can add 2 more to that. There are 11. We'll take a look at who all is running. First up is Chad Bashinsky. He is a longtime Regina resident who has experience leading construction projects. He's also an engineer who now works at Sask Energy. He lives in Regina with his wife and 2 kids. Lori Bresciani, of course, is the 2-term Ward 4 city councillor, vacated that seat in order to run for mayor. She was first elected in 2016. She was actually acclaimed in the last election in 2020, and she has 20 years of small business experience. Melina Bushenlonga has lived and worked in cities around the world. She first came to Saskatchewan 10 years ago and came to Regina 6 years ago. Bevan Fox works with Chief Red Bear Children's Lodge on Cowessess First Nation. She is an author, artist, and talk show host. And that's not all. We have another full page of candidates. Nathaniel Houghton is an advocate for homeless people in Regina and the founder of the Soup After Dark program. Kevin Kardash is a landscape business owner. He is also president of the Regina 35 Lions Club. Sandra Masters, of course, the incumbent mayor, and she was first elected in 2020, becoming Regina's first female mayor. And she unseated incumbent Mayor Michael Fougere at that time. And prior to that, Masters worked as a credit manager with Richardson Agriculture. She has also announced that this will be her last term as mayor. And Bob Pierce, other than Sandra Masters, Bob Pierce is the only other candidate in this race who also ran in the mayoral race in 2020. He has a background in engineering. He finished that race in 2020 in last place with about 127 votes or so. And a look at the final 3 candidates. Yes, one more page to go. Bill Pratt is from Regina, but he has worked across Canada, served on boards including the YWCA and the Regina Airport Authority. He was most recently the CEO of Eden Care Communities. Sean Sparvier is a member of Cowessess First Nation. And Rod Williams, he is an employee of Evraz and a former WHLer, playing with the Regina Pats and also winning a Memorial Cup with the Medicine Hat Tigers in 1987. A lengthy list of candidates for sure. And through it all, one man has been covering the candidates, the issues, and the very, very long council meetings at times for us. CBC's Alexander Kwan is live at City Hall tonight. Alex, what will be happening where you are tonight?
Yes, Ethan, I'm down here at Regina City Hall. This is also Regina City Council chambers. It's where all of the meetings happen, so why not be in the perfect place to see when the results come in. So tonight, what we're expecting to see is results come in a series of batches. Now, you can see behind me, hopefully you can see behind me, a couple screens set up. Now, those are going to be updating as results come in, so we'll be able to follow the various races throughout the night. We are expecting to see results come in fairly quickly here tonight. We've been told by City of Regina officials that the vote tabulators being used by the City of Regina should be able to calculate votes fairly quickly, so we could see results come in maybe 30, 40 minutes, possibly have all results in within the hour. Now, we have heard about a few long lineups at polling stations tonight. That means, obviously, things may be a little bit longer for results to come in, but we're following that closely. We'll see what happens, and we'll see what the results say by the end of the night. Ethan?
Yeah, certainly hoping it's not as long as it was for the provincial election a couple of weeks ago. Alexander Kwan, thank you so much, live at City Hall in Regina tonight. And from covering the provincial election campaign, speaking of, to municipal election night, Adam Hunter has certainly seen his fair share of politics in action this fall. And Adam is live tonight at the watch party for one mayoral candidate in Regina. Adam, where do we find you tonight?
Yeah, Ethan, I'm at the watch party for Sandra Masters, looking to be re-elected as mayor of Regina for a second and final term. She said she won't run again if she's re-elected. It's starting to fill up behind me here. Friends, family, and supporters hoping for a big night for Masters. This is a far cry, Ethan, from 4 years ago when COVID robbed Masters of a proper watch party, and social distancing, masks, all those things were in place at the time. So she's hoping to be able to celebrate a little more traditionally this time around. They're hopeful. And I want to just echo something that Alexander Kwan said. We're hearing as well here from people on the floor that the lines in Regina specifically are very long. People waiting up to an hour in some cases to vote. We're not sure why that is. We'll try and get that answer for you, but we'll wait and see. And when you said we were waiting for results, it sent a bit of a shiver up my spine, Ethan, thinking back to election night. We waited quite a long time for provincial election results, hoping and expecting a different story tonight. Behind me in the room here, Masters and her friends and family and supporters will be watching those results live, and then we're told that she will address the media after those results have come in, so we will hear from her here at the Atlas Hotel in South Regina, hopefully within the next hour. Ethan?
Okay, thank you very much, Adam Hunter at Sandra Masters' campaign headquarters at the Atlas Hotel in Regina. And we will go to Saskatoon now to join Stephanie Massicotte in studio.
Thank you, Ethan. And I am joined by outgoing Councillor Marin Lowen for Ward 7. Marin, earlier you were chatting about, that anti-incumbent sentiment that we're seeing across the province and, the nation, even the world. How do you think that's going to play a part in tonight's election?
It's very difficult to say because traditionally incumbency has been such a tremendous advantage at the municipal level. Without a party political affiliation, many people are able to capitalize on the name recognition that they have as incumbents. But of course we are seeing this broader trend, people feeling frustrated about their quality of life, the pressures of the economy, and so forth. And so I think there could be some interesting races in Saskatoon as a result of that. And of course, As our colleagues in Regina mentioned, anytime you have an open seat, that creates a hotly contested race. So there's going to be lots of races to watch in Saskatoon tonight.
Yeah, and there are 5 open seats. We have 2 acclaimed councillors who will be returning, so that leaves 3 incumbents. Should any of them be worried, or do you have faith that they'll be able to retain their seat?
You know, I think because of the closeness of the race in Ward 1 in 2020, that'll be one to watch tonight, because 2 of the candidates who were very close in 2020 are running again. So that's Darren Hill is the incumbent, challenged by several other people, including his challenger from 2020, Kevin Boychuk. So I think there are a number of candidates in that ward that have been working very hard, including the incumbent, and so we'll have to see what happens there tonight.
All right, thank you so much. And we are still waiting for results to roll in, but as Ethan mentioned, similar idea here. We do have those vote tabulators, so they should be coming in fairly quickly. Our own Charles Hamilton is down at City Hall where those votes will be tabulated, and he has a guest joining him. Charles?
I do, Stephanie. Joining me right now is Phil Tank. He's a columnist with the Star Phoenix, longtime City Hall watcher. So I want to ask you, Phil, what are the main races that you're going to be watching? We don't have any results yet, but what are the main races you're looking forward to?
Yeah, obviously the mayor's race, first time since 1988 that we've had an open mayor's race without an incumbent. So that's obviously going to be the main event. I also think Ward 1, the closest race last time with the veteran Darren Hill holding on to his seat by 56 votes. The challenger that almost beat him last time is back again, and there's another really good candidate in that ward. So Ward 1, you have Ward 2 is open, so there's I think a number of candidates there. Ward 3 is open, Ward 6, and Ward 8. Ward 6, 7, and 8. Sorry, it's hard to keep track. There's so many usually. So yeah, there's a lot. There's definitely a lot to watch this time.
And so throughout the campaign, you wrote a lot about it. What do you think was, if you had to pick one key issue that you think lots of voters are going to be voting on, what do you think the main key issue was this civic campaign?
Well, I know you heard from a lot of candidates that people were talking about homelessness. I'm not sure that's how people are going to cast their votes, though, because I'm not sure that it can be addressed effectively at the municipal level. We can facilitate the building of more affordable or attainable housing at the municipal level, but ultimately, we're not actually building those homes. We're not providing funds to build homes. So, crime is always a big one. It's perennially one. It bounced back after the pandemic. It was really low, and now it's kind of back. It's actually dropped citywide this year compared to the same period last year. But the violent crime is up, which is kind of a bit of an anomaly, and sort of tells me that maybe that's connected to homelessness and other mental health issues and that sort of thing, and not necessarily people planning crimes. And that crimes like arson and car theft are down, which is quite an accomplishment. And again, I'm not sure you're going to easily solve violent crime.
All right, thanks so much. That was the Star Phoenix columnist, Phil Tank. Make sure to look for his column that comes out after we start getting some results, which we might be now. Potentially they're putting something up on the board, but I'll throw it back to you, Stephanie. You can tell us if we're getting any actual results, because I don't actually see any here, just that there's some activity.
All right, thank you so much, Charles. That is Charles Hamilton live from City Hall. Now, Marin, part of the job as councillor is you never really get a day off. Grocery shopping, walking around the city, people probably often stop you and ask you questions, but knowing that you are not seeking re-election, what is top of minds for voters? Have they talked to you about the issues that they're focused on this election?
I think what I'm hearing from people, even in an outgoing capacity, is pretty consistent with the comments we've already heard tonight. I think there's a lot of focus on public safety in Saskatoon and that perception of safety diminishing, even though, as we just heard, maybe the crime statistics aren't actually reflecting that change in the way that people might expect them to. Issues around housing and homelessness, affordability, and of course, anytime people are experiencing that kind of personal household level economic anxiety, it really calls into question bigger municipal projects. And I think in both Saskatoon and Regina, some of these bigger projects are becoming flashpoints for some of that frustration and anxiety. So those are the kinds of topics that I've been hearing about from my residents, even as I exit the role of councillor.
I know we often talk about homelessness, but that is very much a provincial issue. We just had our provincial election. You know, we saw the Sask Party retain or have one MLA voted in here in Saskatoon. So how does council, especially a new council, a new mayor, go about creating that partnership with the provincial government when it comes to these issues?
Well, this is such a complex issue because, as others have already mentioned this evening, the municipal order of government really doesn't have a huge amount of decision-making space when it comes to housing and homelessness and creating new affordable housing. Both Saskatoon and Regina have taken some steps through the federal HAF program to incentivize more units, but there really isn't that capacity to create supported housing or greater numbers of affordable units. So it's all about partnership and leveraging what each order of government can bring to the table. And I would note that it's not just the relationship between local governments and the provincial government, but also the federal government and Indigenous governments, because all of those parties have a role to play in addressing the issue. I think the reason that it can be so difficult for voters to distinguish these kinds of jurisdictional responsibilities is that we can talk about how housing and social issues, mental health, addictions are the responsibility of the provincial government, but when people are driving or walking around the city and they see evidence, visible evidence of homelessness rising, that hits home on the streets of their city, and it becomes local in the way that it has to be addressed, unfortunately. Even though this is not an effective way to problem solve these crises, often it becomes the job of first responders at the municipal level to have that first line of intervention. And so I think it is natural in some ways that voters have a difficult time parsing out whose job it is to do what. And ultimately, one thing we've been hearing over the last couple of years is people don't want to hear about jurisdictional squabbles. They want to hear about solutions. So maybe it is the province's responsibility, but they really are increasingly expecting local governments to step in and help out. And that's true across Canada. That's not unique to Saskatchewan.
All right, Marin, thank you so much. And if you are just joining us, that is outgoing Councillor Marin Lowen. We'll throw things back now to Ethan Williams in Regina. Ethan?
Okay, thanks so much, Stephanie. And if you are just with us now, welcome to Saskatchewan Decides 2024. This is CBC Saskatchewan's civic election special, and thanks for joining us wherever you're joining us from. If you're on YouTube, if you're watching on our website. We are here in our Regina studio this evening with two outgoing Regina City Councillors, Andrew Stevens, outgoing from Ward 3, and John Findura from Ward 5. We have heard some potentially promising news so far, gentlemen, about maybe some turnout in this election. We know that in Regina there are still some long lineups at some polls that have been going on. We heard about 15,000 people have turned out for advance voting, so some good news there. But historically, Andrew, turnout has been quite low, around 20% in these last couple of elections. I mean, municipal politics is very important and affects people at the doorstep. So why is that turnout so low?
That's a good question. I don't think it's a unique problem that Regina experiences. I think low turnout is a phenomenon we see across North America at the municipal level. I think in the last 70 years, there's only a few occasions where it hovered above 50%. So sadly, this is the norm. And I've become a bit of a fanatic about municipal politics because of how important it is. And I hope residents are seeing its significance. I actually think that's one of the reasons you're seeing a lot more third-party organizations involving themselves, is because this council has shown that there's a number of items that we can actually address and tackle and talk about within the wheelhouse of our jurisdiction and our authority. Some didn't like it, and they wanted to change the tide. But I think it's nothing but a good thing to see lineups. We've made voting more accessible. The advanced polling, online ballots, remote mail-in ballots that we advanced during the pandemic. And I think it also goes hand in hand with the fact that there is more engagement during council than I've ever seen. And John can probably attest to what that's looked like in the past, everything in delegations, town halls, every measure that you can think about of residents being engaged. I've seen more of it. And so what I'm seeing is kind of an expression at the ballot box of what we've seen evolve over the last couple of years.
What do you think is building that engagement?
I think probably there's just a general sense of frustration. Incumbents are not the most popular folks at any level. We watched the presidential elections. We saw what happened provincially. There's that. I think something happened during the pandemic. to be honest with you. I think folks started paying attention in different ways to municipal government. Some of it's been positive, if we're thinking about the turnout. I also know in instances in Quebec and Ontario, people quit mayors and councillors because of threats and violence and the abuse that came with the job. So I think there might be a double-edged sword, but I think people are realizing how important different levels of government are, and they want to be more involved.
John, Andrew brings up a good point about third-party influence in the elections, and of course, we're talking about groups like Advance Regina, Common Sense Regina. I'm curious, have you, in your 15 years of council, have you ever seen that sort of influence make its way into municipal politics before?
Never. This is this first time. So it's a difficult thing to kind of figure out what's going on. Because when you think about civic link, you just kind of talked about the 20% of residents in Regina, per se, voted, right? That's low. Hopefully it goes higher. So I don't know. Has that stirred something up? Has having so many incumbents not running, has that stirred that interest, or maybe some different movements happening? So I don't have really a comment. So I would say for me, it is. Well, let's be honest about this. Council, we are right there with people. Any time, any day, anyone can approach us. They can come to council. They can be a delegation at the store, anywhere. I can't go anywhere without. My wife just keeps shopping, and I'm in aisle 7 discussing some business about different issues in the community. So, but I'm hoping now this time that people will get engaged a little bit more and figure out and read about who's there and help the councillor. Whoever wins, assist the councillor doing his job. But if you don't connect or engage with the city council, then the council for say might not know. We're not perfect. It's a part-time gig, but it's a full-time job. So it's difficult as it sounds like. So that this is where maybe the news and media that's going on, that's shifting certain things, telling folks, again, like we heard, go vote, you have a voice, not necessarily complain. But let's talk about the good things that's happening as well. Let's talk about what our city is all about, like Regina, good things about our city, and being engaged and involved and promoting that. So hopefully this vote brings a lot of good council and whoever on the mayoral side and govern properly, right?
I want to talk more about this later because it's such a fascinating topic. I think we could talk all night just about this, probably this one topic. But we do have some results that are just coming in now from Regina. And of course, this is for the race for mayor. And it is Chad Bashinsky who is out in front. Incumbent Mayor Sandra Masters in a second at the moment. I should note, though, we are still very early in the evening, and this, I'm being told, are just advanced polling numbers. So this does not actually reflect the ballots that were cast today. This is just from advanced ballots. But Chad Bashinsky, just shy of 1,000 votes there. Sandra Masters, about 130 or so votes behind. Outgoing Ward 4 City Councillor Lori Bresciani in third place there behind Masters by exactly 200 votes, and then falling in behind that with about 500 is Bill Pratt. Andrew Stevens, is this the way that you thought that, oh, pardon me, actually before we get to that, of course, there's more candidates we have to get to. Melina Bushanlonga with a 24. Bevan Fox, the highest of the group there that you see, around 180. And with just a few votes each for Nathaniel Houghton and Kevin Kardash. And of course, that's not all. We still have Bob Pierce and Sean Sparvier and Rod Williams, who all kind of sit in that double-digit territory in terms of the results. Now, I will ask you, Andrew Stevens, is this the way you thought this would kind of shape up this early?
I mean, we still have a lot more votes to go, but I suspected that the 4 you saw there in the lead were going to be the top 4 contenders. So that part makes sense. I think it's quite an effort to be brand new to the scene, not well known in the community, not part of a municipal board such as Chad, and coming out with a lead this early. I think that's a really interesting development, but I think if we were thinking of who the top 4 serious contenders were, that part seems pretty predictable. But I think it's going to be a really interesting race as a result.
Sandra Masters, of course, had involvement with Real, and so that was kind of her connection when she came in. But other than that, no kind of overall, she had not sat on City Council. How interesting is it that, if the results continue the way that they do, you could have two candidates, well, you do have two candidates who are at the top who don't really have that extensive council experience like someone like Lori Bresciani.
It's interesting because I'm not sure watching or being part of a council makes you want to run for a mayor position. So, maybe it's a bit of optimism that you can do the job and before seeing how it functions. But look, there's a lot of people at the city that are there to help you. So I think there's this understanding that the council gets together and we decide which roads are going to be repaired and what projects are going to be advanced. There's a public service, incredibly capable people that are actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And we provide them with policy direction on new initiatives or established initiatives. So you're not working in a vacuum. You don't have to be a technical expert. I could not tell you how to build a bridge, but I will make decisions with advice from folks with finance experience, planners, folks who actually understand the mechanisms required to build infrastructure, providing us advice. So it's certainly feasible, and perhaps you just get those fresh ideas. I was not part of the Regina establishment by any measure when I entered the race and I won. You can catch up, and sometimes that fresh experience is perfectly fine, to be honest.
Yeah, interesting, because John, you've served a lot of years on council. Is that something you agree with, that you can kind of be a political newcomer, maybe to council or mayor, and it maybe works to your advantage?
I do agree. I came as a newcomer. I worked in the community, but still a newcomer, and you don't necessarily understand all the moving blocks within what that means, being on council or even a mayor. And so, yeah, I can see folks looking at different things, and it's very difficult to read what the resident is looking for on a big scale. Right now you have 11 candidates for a mayor. That's a large field for folks to even educate themselves, and even at the council level to educate themselves, read about all the councillors, what they stand for, and try to figure them out on the doorstep through the media. So it's a task and a half. And I think this election, there's increase of interest from individuals running for different positions, right? So it's tough. So yeah, I would see what's happening right now at the top four. You look at that, and we can't predict. You could talk about a whole bunch of stuff. People talk all the time about different things. You don't know. Resident might tell you, I'm going this way, or what should I do, go that way, or I'm looking for this. It's not a confusion sometimes of what folks do want and they're looking for in a candidate even. But I would say yes. It's being a newcomer, it's not always a bad thing, right?
Okay. Well, on that note, we have a few more results that have come in now for the Regina mayoral race, and Chad Baczynski still out in front. This is the kind of the same top four as we were talking about, the lineup that they were in the last time we saw results, and a more now significant lead for Chad Baczynski with just over 5,100 votes there. Sandra Masters at 4,400, very close to Lori Bresciani, only about 100 votes separating those two. Bill Pratt a little further back there at about 2,700 of those votes there. So Chad Baczynski out in front again, as we see kind of this second time around, as we get a little more substantial results. Andrew, we talk about incumbents as of late. Voters not particularly kind to them. We've seen that in our own country, in the country next door, all around the world. With a little more substantial results coming in now, perhaps is this a little bit of that disadvantage that incumbents have been having? Certainly, right? If you have problems in your neighborhood, if there are projects that aren't being tended to, who are you going to look to address it or to blame? And the elected officials, of course, are those representatives of the city. So if people are disgruntled with the state of our infrastructure, the pace at which change is happening, if they're looking at the relationship between council, obviously you're going to look to the mayor as someone who has to be held accountable and responsible for it. So if all else fails, you do have elected officials that are put in a position to take the blame when things don't go well, and they'll put someone else in that the people believe will better represent their interest and manage the affairs of the city that people care about. Yeah, John, if we do see a new mayor tonight and a whole bunch of new councillors, what kind of maybe advantage or disadvantage does that fresh perspective bring to the city?
Well, I would say that for the first, because the initial shock of being there, and the second shock of you're actually in the seat that it's hot. It will be a learning curve, incredible learning curve, and because if you might think there'll be no knowledge there or experience. So it's going to be difficult, right? And it'll be difficult on the administration, difficult on the city clerk, difficult on all the folks to, now there's going to be heightened education period and support. I remember myself when I got in there, I got into a mayor's seat to do city council. I've never done that before. And incredible. So when you think about those things, that could happen. I mean, anything could happen as the council gets formed. So steep learning curve. Everyone's going to have to pull up their socks, and there's going to be lots of work. But administration is going to have a big job for the first year, honestly, to get everybody on board. The budget's coming, right? Everything's still running. The projects have to go, so you can't stop. And these folks are just going to have a awakening when they see the numbers, right? Yeah. So, but you know what? I would, you need. I mean, it's a big new. Could be trouble. So kind of middle of the road. A lot of times we're usually about 5 this way, 5 that way. It helps to kind of carry, but people are speaking, right? So this is who elects. We don't elect ourselves. It's the people out there elected. So what I would say is that going on is individuals not necessarily have the time to educate themselves about issues that happen at council, from council to mayor, what they were dealing with. A lot of hearsays come, a lot of stuff that comes out, not really what the facts are. And this is where the difficulties are. Having provincial election, now the civic, I don't think people had time to really kind of wrap their arms around the civic election, because it seems to be like a leftover, whatever, right? So it's difficult, right?
Yeah, it was a really quick turnaround, and I know that for some people they're going, oh yeah, that's right. We still got one more election to get through here in the province. I should mention that the results that we've had in from Regina, that is 13 of 44 polls that are reporting now, and just over 18,000 of those ballots counted there. So some excitement happening in Regina. We'll check in with Stephanie Massicotte in Saskatoon.
Thank you, Ethan. And we are hearing reports that there are still people in line here in Saskatoon to vote. So that is why we haven't seen any results yet here in our city. We are still waiting for them. But once again, Marin Lowen, outgoing councillor, joins me. Marin, I want to talk about voter turnout. I mean, in the advance polls, we saw a little over 19,000 people vote. We saw creative ways to vote this year as well, with some super polls. We saw the drive-through voting as well. 2020, we had the huge snowstorm. It was COVID, the pandemic. Do you think we're going to have higher voter turnout this election?
Yeah, I do think voter turnout is going to rebound slightly. We had that double whammy of the pandemic and then a very memorable snowstorm in 2020. And I think the question is whether or not it rebounds to previous levels. And I'm skeptical that it will, but you never know. And I think, as our other guests mentioned tonight, there have been a lot of efforts to make voting more accessible and to make it easier for people. But there is the compounding sort of intervention of competing elections, and there's only so much airspace and attention that can be paid to elections. And what I have sort of experienced, at least in 2020, is a lot of confusion with the provincial election. And of course, people are very interested in watching the election to the south. So it'll be interesting to see how much of the sort of election fatigue does impact voter turnout. I do think we'll see those numbers come up from 2020. I'm not sure whether or not they'll be particularly high.
All right, well, we'll have to wait and see. Charles Hamilton is live at City Hall this evening. And Charles, you have another guest joining you right now.
I do. We're getting some early results here, but I have with us the Chief Returning Officer for the city, Shelley Bryant. So just tell us, when can we start expecting the general public to see results posted online?
Yeah, so we're currently running we're closing the advance polls that happened on November 1st to 4th. We're posting those results in our lobby hear the tapes. Once all of those 10 machines have been closed, we are going to take those results into the council chamber and post them onto our website. So I'm seeing that we have 4 out of 10 posted, so probably another 15 minutes and we should see our first set of results. We are also waiting to post those results to make sure that all voters have cast their vote before we post any results.
Yeah, I mean, we did hear that there were people waiting in line still because they were there before 8 o'clock. And so do you have any general sense of how long it'll be till we get a final count, till we get all of the polling stations? And maybe that's too big of a question for this early in the night, but I maybe want your prediction.
Yeah, so we're already receiving tabulators from some of the polls. I think we've received about 4 of those already. So once we get the advance done, we are feeding ballots, as I mentioned earlier, in the council chamber for the special polls and hospital polls, as well as our drive-through polls. So once we get those, we'll get those posted. So once we get the 10 advance posted, I think you're going to see some of the other results coming fairly quickly after that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That again, Shelley Bryant, she is the returning officer for this election here in Saskatoon. And as you can see, it's getting busy in here. There's candidates showing up. There's people wondering what's going on. So we'll find out in a few minutes here when those first results are posted publicly online. And we'll find out who the next mayor is and what those 5 open council seats, who's taking those over. Stephanie?
Thank you, Charles. That's Charles Hamilton live from City Hall this evening. Now, Marin, we were talking about voter turnout. You were talking about, election fatigue and a bit of confusion as well. But I'm wondering, having, the options for people and also having a lot of new open vacant spaces, including mayor, do you think that will help bring those numbers back up?
I think it's always true that when there are contested races, it tends to increase voter turnout. One of the things that can really impact voter turnout is how much contact campaigns have with the voters, whether or not they are able to have a conversation with candidates, understand the issues, and then understand where and how to vote. And so I think there are some wards where we're going to see a higher voter turnout because of the level of engagement and the work that those candidates have been putting in. It may be the case that in the wards that are acclaimed, the voter turnout is slightly lower, but it'll be interesting to see whether or not that's the case. The mayoral race often does drive voter turnout as well, and so when there is a hotly contested mayoral race, it does tend to stimulate that voter turnout. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not that is the case tonight. I think all of the campaigns have been quite engaged, and I think the mayoral race has captured public interest. But whether or not that translates, voting is somewhat a matter of habit as well. And so we have seen a general declining trend at the municipal level, not just in Saskatchewan, but across the country. And so it'll be interesting to see whether we see that start to climb back up post-COVID this year.
All right, thank you, Marin. Liam O'Connor joins us now. He is live at Cynthia Block's watch party. Liam, what can you tell us? What's the vibe like down there?
Well, it's a little more subdued here because, frankly, it's just a bigger space in here, but it's also just for close friends, family. Cynthia's in the back somewhere. But everyone else is over at 3 Hall, I'm told, for the official watch party, and that's where things are really kind of going down right now. But joining me is Rebecca Cormack, the campaign manager for Cynthia Block. Rebecca, how are you feeling tonight? The results are going to come in shortly here.
I'm feeling really good, and we're seeing some of the results come in, and I think it's looking pretty strong for Cynthia. And it's not really a surprise because we've been working very hard over these last 9 months, and the results are paying off, and seeing the voice of Saskatoon's coming through tonight.
Tell me a little bit about that work. What kind of work have you been putting in?
We're just seeing some positive numbers coming in from our scrutineers out there. Not all the numbers are in, as you know, but as we wait for those counts, we know it from what we've heard when we're knocking on doors, when we've been calling people and texting people. We've had around 5 zone houses out there across the city today. Another reason why we're subdued, because our volunteers are still hard at work and cleaning up and helping and thanking our hosts. It's just a great, positive day across the city.
And it's been a tough year for incumbencies, and obviously Cynthia Block is not the incumbent mayor, but she was on the most recent city council. So how do you see that playing a role in this election with her being on the most recent city council?
From what we've heard, although I think we've heard 2 things. We've heard that people want change, and Cynthia is that change. And I think people also appreciate the continuity and the context that Cynthia brings, and Cynthia brings that as well. So we're hearing good things about her incumbency, if that's a perception. Cynthia has a different approach, and I think she's made that clear over the last several months as she's been chatting with people, listening to voices, and hearing what they want to see in the city.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Good luck. This is Rebecca Cormack. She is the campaign manager for Cynthia Block, and I'm going to throw it back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Liam. That is CBC's Liam O'Connor from one of Cynthia Block's watch parties. We're going to head back down the highway to Regina and throw things back over to Ethan Williams. Ethan.
Well, Stephanie, we've got some more results coming in right now for Regina's mayoral race, as Saskatoon is still waiting for theirs. This is on 21,000 votes that have been counted. 16 of 43 polls reporting Chad Baczynski still ahead at this point, and now he has a new second-place challenger. Lori Bresciani has pulled ahead of Sandra Masters, the incumbent mayor. Lori Bresciani, outgoing Ward 4 councillor. Baczynski still with a significant lead, about 1,400, just under 1,400 votes separating Baczynski and Bresciani. And Sandra Masters, boy, that race is close between her and Bresciani. The last time we looked at the results, Masters was just ahead of Bresciani. Now they flip-flopped. Bill Pratt still maintaining a 4th place spot where he has been for, well, I think pretty much all the nights since we've had results. He has been in 4th place. Andrew Stevens, I'm curious because if the results hold, we could see a new mayor once again in Regina. We've had some years, though, in Regina of stability when it comes to mayors. I think back to Larry Schneider and Doug Archer and Pat Fiacco and kind of these multiple term serving mayors. If we see a change in mayor tonight, that'll be the first time in a while that we've had, a one-term mayor. What does that do for the stability of council and just even for the residents of the city?
It's a good question. I'd say maybe the first point you might want to look at would be the actual details of a campaign platform, which in many cases you have exceptional candidates and then you have some that are pretty vague in terms of what they want to accomplish. I think the top 4 more or less have some substance. I think Mayor Masters has the past 4 years in terms of building a CV of what she would want to accomplish, but that matters. Again, it goes back to the fact that you have a civil service that is doing the day-to-day work, and they provide guidance and they provide assistance to council to make decisions. But I think it depends on the big projects. So we have seen a number of important challenges that residents want us to address, from infrastructure to inner-city revitalization, community well-being. I think it's going to matter how much they want to deviate from the status quo or how much they want to advance the platforms and the initiatives and the strategies that have essentially already been built for them. There's been a lot of heavy lifting over the last 4 years. So I think whoever gets elected, I think is going to get tossed, a softer pitch, because a lot of work has been done to deal with how do you handle homelessness and how do you deal with community well-being and what kind of infrastructure projects are prioritized. They're going to have that toolkit to work from. So I think it's just a matter of when you hear them speak tonight, what is it they want to advance and how are they going to balance that with 10 other different voices? And it can be chaos. So just having everybody going in the same direction is going to be tough. And I think that's where a mayor and councillors who are coming back as incumbents can provide some guidance to help everybody figure out the background and to guide folks ahead, even if there's different competing interests.
John, Andrew mentions the kind of tasks ahead of council here. You've served under several mayors, and you've been part of multiple iterations of council. Is what council is facing this time around, just with the number of projects, what lies before them, do you think they have a bit of a more difficult task than the previous iterations of City Council?
I would agree, definitely. So yes, it's going to be difficult. Like Andrew mentioned about having some stability there, the knowledge to move to certain things. So the residents are asking for certain things. Sometimes what they ask for not necessarily they're going to get, right? So there's the difficulties in that prediction. But it's going to be a tough chore too, because there are projects out there already, and you can't just say, "Oh, we're just going to wipe them off and we're going to start new." You can't do that. It's a different atmosphere. So I do see it's, like I said, and each mayor and every individual that's your next new best friend at that time, right? So it's completely, it throws everything out. So each mayor thinks and works and adjusts or delegates or whatever, how you want to say it, different. You come into that chamber, one vote. And so all 11 are either at fault or at the good or positive or negative on how you move things forward. So it isn't just the one person. And then that's going to be, like I said, it could be, like to see what else is going on within council, who's coming. We know the 6 are not going to be there. Who knows, right? So I would say, I'm like, wow, right? So it's, in a little bit of a birdie here saying maybe kind of be there to witness this, but in that hand says, I don't know if I want to be there to witness that, right? So it's kind of like a fiddler on the roof, one or the other, right?
Yeah,
but it's going to be tough. I mean, there are individuals who are dedicated, they're educated, they're passionate. They'll get through it, right? They'll get through it with, like Andrew said, with the help of the administration. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and with 11 mayoral candidates, over 50 people running for city council, yeah, a lot of people vying, and a lot of new faces and personalities that could be part of that for sure. We are going to head back to Saskatoon again. If you have just joined us, we have Chad Bashinsky in the lead for mayor in Regina. We'll see if we have any results in Saskatoon now. We'll join Stephanie Massicotte.
Thank you, Ethan. No results yet. We are still waiting to hear on those. Last we heard there were still some people in line. So we're almost an hour in since the polls closed. So hopefully people who were in line were able to cast their ballots before we get counting. But Marin Lowen, outgoing councillor, joins me once again. We heard when Liam was at Cynthia's watch party, I guess we can call it, that people refer to her as the incumbent. We don't have an incumbent mayor, but she was the last person on city council that is running for mayor now. A lot of people say she has ties to Charlie Clark. Do you think she did enough to separate herself from Charlie?
Yeah, I think that question or that challenge is a bit unknowable because of course there would also be some voters that would be looking for some of those ongoing priorities or values. So it's difficult to say. I think that an interesting dynamic, which is a bit distinct from what we're seeing in Regina, is that I would say the 3 frontrunners in Saskatoon's race have also served on council at one point or another. Of course, Cynthia's got the most recent term on council and therefore maybe the most recent baggage and maybe the most recent sort of insights and advantages. So I think it does cut both ways. As to the question of whether or not she's done enough to sort of present a distinct vision or a distinct identity for herself, I believe that she has. And although I think there are probably lots of people who would see, or argue that Cynthia would be an extension of Charlie in the mayor's chair. Having worked with both of them, I can attest they do have different approaches and different priorities. And although they have shared a lot of votes on a lot of issues, I do see that there would be 2 very different approaches to the role of mayor here. So I think there has been enough done to make that distinction. But I think for those who are dissatisfied with council, they are likely in any case to look for a candidate outside of current council members. So for those people who are really feeling that anti-incumbent feeling and wanting to see a wholesale change in the mayor's chair, I think they'd be disinclined to consider Cynthia as a candidate in any event.
What about when we look at Gord Wyant? You know, he was an MLA for the Sask Party for, I believe, 14 years. Has he done enough to separate himself? I mean, we saw the NDP almost sweep Saskatoon. Has he done enough to take a step back from the Sask Party and run as his own person?
Again, you know, I think it's quite a difficult thing to say. I think we'll see whether or not the results of the provincial election have sort of weighed him down in some capacity. You know, I think he did quite a good job of presenting himself as an individual candidate. However, in the early stages of his campaign, I think he was hampered by some degree about questions about the anti-trans legislation, which, you know, and sort of the responses as to whether or not he supported that. I think that those storylines dominated the first couple weeks of his campaign, and so that in combination with the provincial results last week are some factors that might have had an impact on how possible it was for voters to see him as a nonpartisan entity. But again, you know, this sort of presupposes that all voters want to see those kinds of distinctions. Some don't, right? Some would be quite happy to see a mayor with a Sask Party affiliation in the chair. So it's a question of where the broader sentiment is in the community, and I think both candidates have worked hard to create distinct identities as mayoral candidates. I think those are our two front runners in Saskatoon, but I do want to say that Don Acheson has also had a very active campaign and is, you know, very comfortable in forums like mayoral forums, debates, and community events. And so I think all three of those candidates have been working quite hard, and will be very interesting to see what resonates ultimately with voters in Saskatoon.
Well, we are still waiting to see what resonates with voters. As Marin said, we're still waiting for results to roll in, as we are now at over an hour since polls closed. We'll throw things back down to Ethan Williams in Regina.
I'm having visions of that provincial election, Stephanie. I thought this was supposed to be fast, but who knows? You know, you never know what can happen in an election. Well, I guess we'll just wait and see. But yes, if you have just joined us, still waiting for results in Saskatoon. Regina, we have about 13 of the 44 polls reporting, with Chad Baczynski in the lead right now, and Lori Bresciani in second place. Incumbent Mayor Sandra Masters in third right now. She and Bresciani are in quite a tight race. You can see the numbers there. About a 1,300, 1,400 now point lead for Chad Baczynski over Lori and Sandra. And of course, the whoever ends up being elected mayor this evening in Regina, whether it's a re-election for Sandra Masters or a brand new mayor, they will end up at City Hall in Regina, and that is where we find CBC's Alexander Kwan.
Yes, Ethan, I am here at Regina City Hall still as we wait for more results to come in. And speaking of results, I'm joined by Jim Nickel, who's the Chief Returning Officer for the City of Regina and also City of Regina's clerk. So, Jim, what are we kind of seeing in terms of results? When can we expect things to be fully in for us to know who's the winner?
Well, I think we stand right now at about a third of the polls have come in. It's going to be a bit longer tonight than we anticipated because of what appears to be a very high voter turnout. I know of at least 3 polling stations that are still open, and they still have people in line to process. So, of course, anybody who was in line prior to 8 o'clock gets to vote, and that's what we're processing. And then when that's done, it's going to take another 20 minutes or so for the results to be tabulated through the vote counting machines. So we're here for a while.
So, Jim, talking of some long lineups, we've heard of some long lineups. Why is there long lineups right now? And I guess, what is the city doing, I guess, to address maybe those long lineups?
Well, at this point of the evening, there's not much more we can do other than extend the hours for those people. We're incredibly pleased with what appears to be a very strong voter turnout, a significant uptake from 2020. As I said before on many occasions, We provided people with 4 days of advance polling. That saw us increase about 800 or 900 over 2020. I think we had approximately 23 or 2,400 mail-in ballots that have come back. And the fact that every race, both across the city and for school boards, they were all contested, no acclamations. I think it just points out that the public is engaged. They were listening. And, hats off to our communications team who did a great job in getting information out there to kind of declutter from the provincial election that was held on the 28th of October.
So, Jim, thank you very much. Ethan, I'll throw back to you in the studio. I just spoke with Jim Nickel, the Chief Returning Officer for the City of Regina and the City of Regina's clerk. Ethan?
Okay. Very interesting to hear from Jim Nickel. Thanks very much, Alexander. And as Jim mentioning, he knows of 3 polling stations that are still open, and we're now over an hour after the polls have closed. And here are some of the results that we're seeing from that now. This is some updated results, 18 of 43 polls, about 23,000 votes, and Chad Baczynski is extending his lead over his next competitor. He is now at just over 6,900 votes. Lori Bresciani and Sandra Masters, that is a neck and neck, just 7 votes separating the two of them there at the moment. That has gotten tighter between those two all night long. Bill Pratt, again, has been sitting in that last place position all night long. He now just has over 3,200 votes. Want to welcome back in our panel in Regina, Andrew Stevens, outgoing Ward 3 City Councillor, John Findura, outgoing Ward 5 City Councillor. John, 3 polling stations still open. This obviously, as Jim Nickel said, they're dealing with a very high voter turnout. Is that something you've ever seen either in your time on council or just following municipal politics here?
No, this is first, which is good to see that, because that tells me and tells us that the residents out there are getting engaged. Because whatever matters in this municipal government, they need to be engaged. They need to speak their minds, and that's important. We spoke about that. We talked about that for years, getting people out there, because we are the first, we're the government that they can touch us, they can come to see us. So this is good that see all the people coming out and engaging and voting. That is the right to vote. And if you want to, for incumbents, for new, or however, just as everyone says, just go and vote to get involved. It's good to see that. Yes, we dealt through pandemic, was a different situation. But if you look back to the 2016 and now to 2024, you compare those numbers, that's if we see 25, 30% or whatever more, that's great to see that. Mm-hmm. That tells you that people are interested in this, in a municipal, because there's a lot of issues. Like Andrew mentioned, the big projects that are happening, the things, the infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, and all those things, parks, open spaces, growing the city, all of those things are important to people, and they sounds like folks are going out or gone out and exercise their right.
Yeah, and Andrew, to that point, we talked a bit earlier about how third-party influence may be driving the vote a little bit, but it is true that this has been a council term that has seen a lot happening. Do you think maybe that is kind of catalyzing people, no pun intended, to the Catalyst Committee, but that's kind of getting people out there?
Undoubtedly. Whether it's good or bad, I think we did a check maybe 6 or 7 months into the council term after the election 2020. And I think we had actually dealt with more reports than we had in the previous 2 years. And so I think there's a pace of change and there's a pace of issues that I don't think the city was used to seeing in the past. And I think a lot of it unsettled people. I think a lot of folks were excited about it. And then, there's all sorts of other drama and other issues that just kind of are thrown onto your plate and you're forced to respond to it. So I think it's all of those factors. But I can say the 4 years that I'm just coming out of now are so different than the first 4 years. Like, I can't tell you how different it is in terms of the pace, the scale of the issues, the significance. You're dealing with a pandemic and then you're trying to recover from that. Undoubtedly, people are interested or they're disgusted or, they're trying to enact some kind of change, or they're showing up, if you're seeing the polls, that they're coming to vote for folks that they have in the past, right? So I think it'll be really interesting to see after the fact and to have conversations with residents, because you've won Did you win on a platform of change, or did you win on a platform of I can do it better than that previous person, so let's take all these initiatives and run with them? That's something that they're going to have to decipher on their own.
And we have heard from people during this campaign, even people at the polling stations today saying, well, I'm not necessarily here to vote for someone. I'm here to vote against someone else, which is interesting in a municipal election campaign. I guess I should mention that in the last couple of elections in Regina, that voter turnout has hovered around the 20% mark. It was over 30% in I believe it was the 2012 election. Highest voter turnout, by the way, was 1988 with 56%. That is just over what we saw in our provincial election this year. We are going to go now back to Stephanie Massicotte in our Saskatoon studio.
Thank you, Ethan. I am joined once again, if you are just joining us, with outgoing City Councillor Marin Loewen, who served in Ward 7. Marin, no matter what happens tonight, we are going to have a new mayor. We are going to have at least 5 new councillors. What lies ahead for them?
Well, almost immediately, that council will need to start thinking about the 2025 budget. So it'll be a very short period of orientation, and then that council will need to start making decisions for 2025, within the first 4 weeks of their having been sworn in. And that is a huge job. I mean, it's like learning a whole new language, learning how an organization of that size and the diversity of services that the city offers, it's like it's drinking from a fire hose in those first few weeks and months. So that will be one of the first jobs of this council. And I think figuring out how they want to work together. And it takes a lot of time to sort of establish those norms. One thing a lot of us said about the previous council was that even though, we were sort of characterized as being a divided council with a lot of close votes, it was a council that worked very well together and was able to spend most of our time focusing on the issues. And so it takes time to sort of build up those relationships and figuring out how do you want to work together to try to achieve your various goals and the commitments that you've made to your residents. So preparing for that budget is going to be one of the major tasks, and then settling into the routines and the processes of council. And there's a lot to learn. Of course, city administrations in all of these cities are very professional and provide support and advice to those processes, but it will take some time for councillors to learn how to be effective.
I can't have you here as an outgoing councillor and not ask you what advice you have for those fresh new faces.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to my first days, weeks, and months on council, I think I really took advantage of the knowledge that my colleagues had acquired, trying to get advice from as many people as possible. I think there's a very understandable urge when you're first elected to get a lot of things done quickly. And I guess my advice to incoming elected people tonight would be to try to take your time to learn the ecosystem that you're a part of and to figure out how you can be effective. We all want to get in there and deliver on the things we said we were going to do, but the most effective way to achieve those goals is to figure out how you can leverage resources, how you can work with your colleagues, how you can work with what's already being planned, and how you can work with your community. So I think I'd advise people just not to rush and to try to do as much reading as you can, orient yourself, and then figure out how to be strategic.
Well, thank you so much, Marin. We still have a lot to talk about and apparently a lot of time because we are still waiting on results to come in to Saskatoon. But Ethan, we'll throw things back to you.
Yeah, 18 of 44 polls in Regina, making it look pretty good compared to Saskatoon's picture right now, for sure. A lot of tap dancing in a lot of places as we try to figure out all of these results. Stephanie, we will check back in with you in just a little while. But of course, part of the challenge of this municipal election is knowing which ward your neighborhood is in. In Regina and Saskatoon, there have been several changes since the last election. Here now is a look at which neighborhoods have been added to each ward, starting with Regina. Ward 1 now includes the Transition Area, Broders Annex, and Dominion Heights. Ward 2 doesn't include any new areas, but actually loses a part of Albert Park. Ward 3 picks up that chunk of Albert Park and also adds Lakeview and McNabb south of the CP rail tracks. If you live in the Aurora retail site around the Costco in East Regina, you're now part of Ward 4. And if you live in Wood Meadows south of Aaron's Road, you're now part of Ward 5. Glencairn, west of Fleet Street, has become part of Ward 6, while Regent Park joins Ward 7. North Central goes from being part of Ward 3 to part of Ward 8. Norman View West, including the Norman View Crossing Mall, joins Ward 9, while Norman View east of McCarthy Boulevard is now part of Ward 10. In Saskatoon, there are much fewer changes. The Confederation Urban Centre, including the Confederation Mall, William A. Reid Park, and the STC Wellness Centre, become part of Ward 2, and Nutana Park will join Ward 9. All other neighborhoods in both Regina and Saskatoon remain in the same wards as the last election in 2020. And if you've just joined us, welcome to Saskatchewan Decides 2024, CBC Saskatchewan's municipal election special. And you're back just in time to catch some results from Regina. We have another round of results that have now come in. This is 21 of 43 polls reporting. This is almost half of the results now, 48.8% coming in. All evening, we've been seeing Chad Baczynski in the lead, and he is maintaining it, now increasing his lead. First, it was over Sandra Masters. Now it's over Lori Bresciani. Baczynski with almost 8,000 votes. Bresciani and Masters had been pretty close the last couple of round of results that we've seen, but now Bresciani seeming to pull away a little bit there with almost a couple hundred more votes over Masters. Bill Pratt has been sitting in around that 3,500 mark or so, 3,000 votes for most of the night, and that is where he remains right now. And again, we are still waiting on the results from Saskatoon this evening, over an hour since the polls have closed, and we are still waiting for the results coming in. But as we just heard in that last piece about ward boundaries, that has been something that has been pretty, at times, contentious for people, and it can cause a lot of confusion. Andrew Stevens and John Findura, our City Council panel, joining us this evening. And Andrew, I know this is something that City Council kind of looks at, these ward boundaries sometimes. Maybe just walk us through about how these changes are made and what, if anything, City Council can do about this.
Well, the short version is nothing. So there's an independent commission that is tasked with reviewing it. Basically, by legislation, you have to have some population proportion, no more or less than 10%. So, there's a very clear direction in the legislation, and you get very independent third-party members of this commission to do some evaluation of how would you change the dynamics of those wards. They try their best to keep communities whole, but that's not always possible. And then just as a matter of formality, it comes before council. And, as a matter of record, we voted against it. Why everybody voted against it, that's maybe for them to explain. But for me, the nature of the communities. I think North Central, downtown, and Cathedral go well together for a variety of reasons. You also build a lot of institutional memory and rapport with those communities. And I think there was something very important about an inner city ward that has challenges that I don't think you see in that level of concentration elsewhere. But, until the provincial legislation is changed, there's a commission, it does this evaluation. The city clerk would be part of that process. And I think they would also look at what we're seeing tonight, is why is there a lag? And they would evaluate how the election went, but they'd also be looking at the contours of those ward boundaries. And I've been through two, and it was very frustrating because you're almost like a brand new councillor and you have to learn the ropes and the communities and the people and the issues and shape a platform and a position on that. So that's kind of what you're up against, and good luck changing that, but because it's just thrust on you as a responsibility, and whether you vote for or against it, it's going ahead anyway.
John, how diverse are the communities that you represent in your ward? Because we were talking earlier about how there are some, major shifts from neighborhood to neighborhood.
They are, when you really look at it. So when the boundaries change, so I might just to make a comment on the lineups. People maybe are confused where they which ward they're in. So I might, that might be finally at the last minute, folks recognize where they are, need which ward and which. Mayors, it's city, but for council, right? So, but shifting, like the ward that changed for me, it kicked me out of my ward. I ended up in Ward 6. It was a huge change. So, like Andrew said, the folks that you interacted with and you worked with, but the changes in demographics from Windsor Park, I'm not saying Glencairn or Glen Elm or whatever, they're different than that, but there are different asks and needs and wants from the individuals on all levels. So you have to really balance all that at council. So more diverse things happen to a certain ward, like Andrew said, and you cut it off, you're adding more difficulties in actually for council, or I mean the whole council to deal with. You know, you're dealing with it at your ward, but then as a council itself for different issues, because the councillor in the area, you are settled with a lot of items of things that you're having difficulty to deal with. And so that's why we voted against that, because it doesn't make sense, the 10% one way or the other. If we would have the chance to set the boundaries, which we should have the ability to do that as a city, to figure out how we manage, not saying that cut this one because it doesn't belong here, it belongs to them. No, we need to figure out what the balance is. And the balance, I believe, what we voted against, the balance wasn't there. That's what we spoke about, saying, we voted, okay, whatever. In a sense, it's a process, how that works, and we don't ever say. I wish later, going to the future, that we would have some say to it. Because you live in the neighborhood, you live in the area, you dealing with that day in, day out. Someone comes in from outside and just says, okay, this is what it is. And then what, right? And then you're dealing with the fracture or the shrapnel, you might say, right? So.
Yeah, and Andrew, you've dealt with a diversity of neighborhoods as well. You have everything from, Cathedral to North Central in Regina. How, when you're campaigning and when you're kind of working with people and door knocking, how do you kind of deal with those different demographic shifts? And are there different ways that you campaign, or is it just the same message for each of those neighborhoods?
That's a good question. I'd say, regardless of the ward boundaries, you are still a representative of the people as a whole. And so you still have to make decisions that are in the good interest of the city of Regina and not just those wards. But you don't want to talk out of two sides of your mouth, right? So I never presented a different image to folks in the downtown than I would anywhere else. You would simply try to figure out what is it specifically that North Central needs. And with luck, there might be some overlap. Or unluckily. So homelessness, crime are very acute issues in the downtown as much as they are in North Central. So while I think there is a divide at times on council about dealing with the question of homelessness, or even in the city, I think it's important for residents to know that's what I'm hearing. This isn't a politically sharpened issue. This is the folks who are living in very opulent condos, who are working in the Hill Towers, are concerned about homelessness and poverty the same way as someone who's living in North Central. So whether I like it or not, this is an issue that I have to deal with. Housing revitalization, et cetera. So I guess I was lucky enough that those issues overlap. But on a day-to-day basis, you're dealing with calls about everything, and you just tend to them. And I think John does an exceptional job about it. And I kind of chuckle when some of these candidates are talking about back to basics. I think they would be lulled into a coma if they saw most of the things that we deal with. If they saw the actual service requests, we can have a whole segment on that. So back to basics, that's what we do 99% of the time. You're covering the sensational issues at council. The reporters there, I think, are in a different world most of the time because it's very banal stuff. So that's what you're really fueled by when you're door knocking, is how do you piece it all together? And then how do you collaborate with other councillors that might have radically different perspectives and material interests? Yeah,
because we hear this back to basics kind of message. Does that exist? Is it real?
It's laughable. Like I laugh at it all the time. It's ridiculous. I have to say, when I saw someone complaining about the height of weeds and they got all measuring tape, and I'm like, you shouldn't run for council. You should run for the parts department. You should apply for a city, get a weed whacker out. Like, you're not a council person or a material. You want to be in the landscaping crews. There's how you can make the best difference if you're thinking about how do you deal with the weeds. But again, almost all of our day-to-day activities are dealing with the garbage that wasn't picked up. I deal with a lot of crises. I deal with people whose CIS payments haven't come through, and I have to go find some groceries for them or connect them with the food bank. Or I have to be on the phone with the city's utility department so I can get their water hooked up. Those are the most basic human needs that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And then if you're lucky, you can address the big issues that you've run on as a campaign. When you're at the council table, you will be frustrated to no end when you find out how little time you have to deal with those big sensational issues, because most of your time, and that's just fine, that's the job, is going to be dealing with the person who is complaining about the squirrels, who doesn't like the pigeons, who has a barking dog. That's your job for the next 4 years. Get used to it. I hope you like it, because there's great reward when you can help people, but back to basics, it's all basics. And if you're lucky, you get a cherry on the top of that ice cream and you get to deal with policy changes that are quite exciting and have long-term impact.
Okay, well, note to future council candidates, that's what you may be dealing with, if you're in Regina at least, or maybe if you're running in Ward 3. We are going to head up to Saskatoon now to check in with Stephanie Massicotte.
Thank you so much, Ethan. I'm joined once again by Marin Lowen, outgoing city councillor. We heard Ethan talking about new ward boundaries, and I want to talk briefly about one ward in particular here, well, two, I guess, in Saskatoon. Ward 3 was the STC Wellness Center, a very contentious issue. It came up a lot in this campaign, in this election, but when we look at the ward boundaries, it actually now sits in Ward 2.
That's right.
So were the Ward 2 candidates talking about it as much as Ward 3?
You know, I think that the ward boundaries here really don't have as much of an impact as you think they might. I mean, the concerns that people have had around this facility are not going to abide by ward changes, and I think both neighborhoods, or both wards, I should say, Wards 2 and 3, have had this issue on their radar. And of course, it's been a focal point, not just of the Ward 3 candidates race, but in a lot of ways, the mayoral race. And the irony being that this is a provincial facility funded by the province, and the location was selected by the province. And so what ability any future candidate has to affect the location of this facility will be very limited, but it was probably one of the hottest topics in that part of the city. So I think the new Ward 2 councillor will probably have a bit of an increase in their management of concerns and communications related to that issue. But at the end of the day, the city's role is, again, one of partnership, because the facility is not a municipal facility and the location was not selected by council, which is distinct from some of the other emergency shelters that we've been talking about over the last year.
All right, thank you, Marin. And we should make mention Ward 2 and 3 are both open seats in this election. We're going to throw things back over to Charles Hamilton, who's live at City Hall this evening. And Charles, I believe you might have some numbers rolling in for us.
Yeah, we're in kind of a bizarre situation a little bit. We do have some physical numbers that are actually being posted as I speak. These are the advance polls right across the city. There's 10 advance polls, and there's physical receipt looking things that are posted on a board just to my right, but we don't have any totals yet, so we haven't had time to actually crunch the numbers and do the math, but we are getting some results. And we're also being told that any minute now, those advanced polls should be going up online. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, we heard earlier in the show just about sort of the long lines in Regina, but it turns out there was probably some long lines here in Saskatoon too. The city officials tell me they were waiting for all the people to vote before starting posting those numbers online. They don't want people looking at their phones, seeing who's winning and voting for the candidate who's maybe winning or losing. They don't want that to influence people's votes. So yeah, I think any minute now we're going to get those totals, but right now there are some, they look like long receipts that you would get if you ate a very expensive meal with a lot of people's names on them. But yeah, hopefully in the coming minutes here, we'll actually get some results online. Those will be the kind of the totals. So we'll get our first look at who might be the next mayor, who's going to fill those council seats, who's returning to city council. But as of now, again, it's just the advance polls and they're just kind of posted here. So we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully any minute now we'll get some actual results posted online. And back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Charles. That's Charles Hamilton live from City Hall this evening. Looks like a lot of people are starting to arrive. When we look at advance polls, Marin, can you tell us the difference between those numbers that we're going to see start rolling in compared to the neighborhood votes?
Yeah, so although it's not universally true, a pattern which we can usually observe with advanced and special polls is the people that vote in advance are keeners. They know in advance who they're going to vote for. They have made a commitment mentally to a candidate. And so what we can see sometimes is that advanced polls, the proportions may look quite different from neighborhood polls. In some cases, people who voted in advanced polls may have voted 10 days ago. And so debates or issues that come up in the home stretch of the campaign might influence how undecided voters cast their ballot. So this is true of a lot of elections, and it may be true, for example, of the American election. The breakdown of advanced votes and early voting is going to look a little bit different than neighborhood polls. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see once we eventually get those numbers, whether or not they sort of mirror the neighborhood polls that come in later tonight, or whether or not different candidates are pulling ahead once we get those election day votes tallied up.
We heard of long lines in Regina, but obviously we're having long lines here in Saskatoon as well. I've had a couple of people let me know, when they left the poll voting at 8 o'clock, there was still a lot of people behind them in line to vote. Does that make a difference? Do you think that's going to change the outcome of this election, those later voters compared to the advance polls?
Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes when we see that type of election day surge, it can represent an increase in that change sentiment or an anti-incumbent sort of bias. I think that's probably part of it. And in another way, it's just very difficult to know. I mean, personal circumstances intervene and often dictate how people vote and when. And those polling locations are often where people stop on the way home from work and so forth. So it's really difficult to say. I hope it means that we're seeing increased voter turnout and engagement with the local election. I am biased, but I think this is a really important thing for people to engage in. It's a order of government that has so much interaction with people's daily lives. So a very positive outcome here would be an increase in voter turnout. But it does indicate to me that perhaps there is a little bit of that change sentiment driving people to the polls and maybe making a last-minute decision to participate in the process.
So when these advance numbers start coming in, how deeply should we be reading into them?
I think what will be interesting to see is how close the candidates are. I think if the advanced poll votes are very close, that means that the election could be very close down to the wire. If we start to see a more comfortable lead building out of those advanced and early polls, and subsequent neighborhood polls don't do much to change that, we might see those early leading contenders ultimately be successful. But it'll be interesting to see how close those advanced numbers are. And if they're close, I think we could have a very exciting finish. As I said, they tend to be the people who have made that commitment earlier on. And so it'll be interesting to see whether or not the last 10 days of the campaign have shifted people's thinking about where they want to align their vote.
All right, well, Charles said that there are some sort of receipts, some physical numbers starting to come up, so hopefully we will see them on the website soon and be able to report those back to you as soon as possible. But right now we're going to throw things back to Ethan Williams in Regina. Ethan?
Yeah, hearing about those receipts just making me hungry. About those posted on the wall. Be interesting to see. We're doing things the old-fashioned way, I guess, now in these strange times of counting the votes. Thanks so much, Stephanie. We'll check back in Saskatoon in just a little while, but we'll welcome back in our panel here in Regina, Andrew Stevens, John Findura, and we heard Marin Lowen talking a little bit about advanced polling there. We had that in Regina as well, the first 4 days of the month here. Andrew, we had about 15,000 people turn out. It's a record number that have come out. Do you think that is kind of indicative of the kind of the people who want to get out, and maybe there's that change sentiment in there as well? Or is this just something that we see, where a trend where advanced polling numbers do just keep going up each election?
It's a great question. I haven't really studied it enough. I'd say, generally speaking, there's not much focus on municipal elections. You can find political scientists all over the place to talk about the provincial election, the American election. There'll be exit polls to determine how people voted. We know very little about municipal elections. So I was actually just kind of listening and being educated by the councillor from Saskatoon, simply because I haven't paid enough attention to it. But if you're voting in the advanced polling, that means you're not waiting for the campaign period to finish. You've probably done some work and you've made a decision, or you know exactly who you're not going to vote for. My takeaway, and something that I've been talking with some of the campaign organizers about, is this kind of changes the campaign, because E-Day is usually where you focus a lot of your energy and you get people out, and you still have maybe a window of a week or two where you're still doing some door knocking, et cetera. That changes the dynamic. You actually have to choose the first day of advanced polling as a big day, and you have to make some pretty big announcements. You have to make some strategic decisions about where you're going to go. So I think it's going to instruct the campaigns now about how you change an election cycle organizing strategy. So for me, that's kind of the takeaway, without knowing the dynamics of how advanced polls signal an outcome, which I don't know. I'm going to be paying attention, and I hope the councillor is giving us another tutorial later on about how this functions.
Yeah, for sure. Marin Lowen bringing us some excellent information there, some insights into how this all works. John, this civic election has come just a couple of weeks after a provincial election. It doesn't seem like, at least from what we're seeing tonight, that there's voter fatigue as a result. But I'm curious, do you think there'd be even more engagement if the date of the municipal election was separated a little bit further from the provincial election?
I would say, yeah. So I'm thinking back to when the 3-year terms were changed to 4-year terms. And we did debate that, where we are going to be kind of clashing with the provincial election, civic election. Usually, so it's good to see that there isn't the voter fatigue. So it's good to see that residents actually were listening. They were actually engaged in the civic politics, and not politics, civic government, to the roads, the sidewalk, the things that see. It's right in front of them. So, but I'm thinking that yes, but like a provincial government, they can change when the election, or when they call election. So could we go back to 3 years to avoid that? And the provincial having 4 years, it worked before. But again, the highest number we had was 52%, right? So, a 3-year term. So, it's a difficult thing. Like Andrew said, we need to study a lot of this thing, because it's civic. You don't have numbers. I don't know. We don't, as a council, we don't call people to find out where am I percentage-wise. We just go out there, talk to people, talk to residents, knock on doors, and just be with the residents. And that's what you do. But so I think, as you said, we need to study this to find out what is it that actually motivates people to come out. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, and on that note, we actually have just heard now that we do have possibly some results coming in for Saskatoon, and we'll head back up to Stephanie Massicotte.
Thank you so much, Ethan. And yes, I believe that we do have a few numbers to share with you when it comes to our top 3 in the race for mayor here in Saskatoon. Cynthia Block, you can see she is pulling ahead with a little over 8,200 votes. Gord Wyant is trailing her at 6,554 votes, and then Don Atchison sitting in 3rd currently. But I do just want to emphasize, these are just the advanced polling numbers, so there is still a lot of votes to come in to be tabulated. But right now, it looks like Cynthia Block is in the lead with just under 2,000 votes. So, yeah, interesting numbers there. Marin, does it surprise you at all, what you're seeing?
No, it doesn't. These are some of the results I expected to see from the advanced polls. I think what we'll want to watch as results continue to come in is whether or not the later voters, the election day voters from neighborhood polls, start to erode that lead, whether it holds steady or whether it grows. And that will depend in large part on individual neighborhoods. Of course, individual neighborhoods have differences in voting turnout, in differences in political alignment and ideology and voting patterns. And a lot of those traditional sort of voting patterns have been turned on their head in the last couple of weeks with the provincial election. And so it'll be interesting to see how individual neighborhoods pan out. In the last 2 elections, very broadly speaking, we saw neighborhoods inside the core vote more strongly for Charlie Clark. Neighborhoods outside of Circle Drive vote for other candidates. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not some of that more progressive voting that we saw in the provincial election bears out at the municipal level, and how the suburbs vote is going to be very interesting and very influential in the outcome of the race.
Some of those suburbs have acclaimed councillors.
That's right.
So is that going to affect people going to the polls and voting if their councillor's already been selected?
It may have an impact. You know, I think the conventional wisdom is that the mayoral race tends to drive people to the polls more than individual councillor races. But certainly when you have active races at the council level, it does engage people. It brings new voters into the mix. And the two councillors that have been acclaimed typically run very high-level, hardworking, and engaged campaigns. And so their absence from the ballot may mean that there is slightly lower voter turnout in those neighborhoods. Another thing that can be a factor, Ward 10 is a neighborhood like this. When you've got new neighborhoods under construction, those neighborhoods can be more challenging to vote in, and that can affect voter turnout as well. So we'll have to wait and see what the numbers look like.
I want to talk a little bit about these acclaimed councillors. I mean, Bev Dubois, a longtime councillor here in Saskatoon. Why do you think people don't run against her?
Well, you know, I think there are a number of factors. One thing I'll say about Councillor Dubois is she works very hard to communicate with her residents. I think she's in touch with people and letting them know what she's up to, and people really appreciate that. Another factor, though, that I think has influenced this campaign, and this is sort of across the board, and there are a number of wards where we saw candidates enter the race, but very late, and not with particularly well-organized campaigns. And I would cite Ward 5 in Saskatoon as an example of that. And, you know, anecdotally, I heard from a lot of people who said, you know, I'm interested in local politics and I'm interested in public service, but I'm not willing to make the sacrifice of running at this time. I think this goes back to some of the questions and concerns we've been talking about economic uncertainty and people's pressures on their individual households. It's a big commitment time-wise. We heard from Regina, you're going to spend a lot of time talking about squirrels. We also have, you know, an increasing workload, and I've heard a lot of people say, I'm not really willing to make the step back in my career to commit to public office. So I think that's an interesting thing to watch. There are a lot of candidates in this race across various wards in Saskatoon. Not all of those candidates have been running full-time, serious, fully funded campaigns. I've also heard from a lot of campaigns how challenging it is to fundraise in this environment. The spending limit went up. It's very expensive to reach all of your residents, and it's an impediment for a lot of people thinking about running. So I think lots of factors to explain those acclamations and to explain maybe some of the lower level of engagement in campaigns across the city at the ward level.
I mean, we do have a total of 45 candidates vying for 11 seats on City Council here in Saskatoon. Do you think they've all done their research on the commitment it takes to be a City Councillor?
No, I don't. And I think it's not always the case that people run to win, frankly. Some people want to run to have the experience, to advance a particular issue or a topic that's important to them. A lot of people run without intending to be successful, and that is fine. That's part of the democratic exercise. One thing we observed, and journalists commented on this at the time in 2020, there was a pretty direct correlation between what people spent on their campaigns and how successful they were. And that has a lot to do with the ability to reach voters. And so it's not possible for everyone to run that kind of campaign.
We're seeing a shot of Cynthia Block. I'm assuming she's looking at numbers. We saw she is pulling out ahead in those early advance polls, but is it enough for her to sit back and relax yet?
No, I don't think anyone should be relaxed at any level at this stage. You know, advance polls tell you one thing. It's sort of a bit of a litmus test of where the electorate was 10 days ago to 5 days ago. And it's also a bit of a litmus test of where your most engaged voters are at. So we know now that amongst the most engaged and committed voters in Saskatoon, Cynthia has a lead. It's also very possible that the neighborhood level polls, the later voters, people who took longer to decide, will vote in different ways. They may mirror the results of the advance polls, but I think you'd want to see in order to be confident about any lead, either to the good or bad, you would want to see a buffer of more than under 2,000 votes at that early stage. It's certainly a positive indication, but because there can be so much variability neighborhood to neighborhood, I do not believe that we can conclude too much from the results at this stage. And we know how differently neighborhoods can vote in Saskatoon. And so it really depends when we start to see those polls come in.
All right, well, hopefully we'll start to see those numbers roll in soon, but for now we're going to throw things back over to Ethan Williams in Regina. Ethan?
And it looks like we have some more results of our own, Stephanie, that continue to roll into the Queen City. And this is 25 of 43 polls reporting Chad Baczynski now with what is becoming comfortable lead over his next contender. Over 2,000 votes now separate Chad Baczynski and Lori Bresciani. And Sandra Masters, I should mention there, of course, the incumbent mayor. She has fallen into third place behind Bresciani in these last few polls. And there is a shot of Sandra Masters now. This is at her watch party, her gathering at the Atlas Hotel in Regina. Masters, worth noting, won the last election over incumbent mayor Michael Fougere. She totaled about 19,000 votes by all was said and done, about 46% of the share of the vote. And again, I believe we are getting into double-digit territory with some of the results coming in tonight, but we have a field of 11 candidates, so that makes it quite difficult to tell just how many in total we're looking at. Again, if you've just joined us in Regina, it is Chad Baczynski with an over 2,000 vote lead over his next contender as mayor. He is now sitting just over 9,500 votes. Outgoing Ward 4 councillor, the only candidate for mayor who was on council, Lori Bresciani, with about 7,500 votes there. We're getting close to that double-digit 10,000 threshold for votes. Andrew Stevens, one thing that's interesting to me, Cynthia Block in Saskatoon is an outgoing city councillor, and she seems to be pulling ahead as of right now with the preliminary numbers that we have there. But Lori Bresciani has failed to achieve a similar status, even though she is a councillor. Do you see any kind of differences between the two of them, or what do you think is kind of causing that?
Boy, I don't know for certain. I mean, folks would comment more probably on the dynamic between council here than they might have in Saskatoon. But as we heard, tension and conflict on city councils is kind of par for the course. So any number of things. It could be the actual record. Perhaps this question of, is it about a pool and not going ahead with what was proposed backfiring. So I could only speculate. But yeah, if you got 8 years under your belt, that could be baggage or it could be an asset. But obviously she's coming in second. Thousands of people have put their confidence in Councillor Bresciani to do the job. I think that's still a testament to her work. But perhaps there's a more intense anti-incumbent sentiment here, or maybe it's a question of you haven't advanced what you said you were going to advance as thoroughly as you have. So I think it's going to be really interesting to be part of this council if there's a big shift. Why did we get elected? None of these mayoral candidates are running on a platform of freezing taxes, which everybody says is the big issue. So that's telling. They're not running on platforms of fiscal austerity. They want to invest in the community. They want to deal with homelessness to varying degrees. So I think there's going to be a moment of self-reflection. And I can't account for why Sandra's appearing in third and Lori second. I think it's a really interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm. John, Sandra Masters, like many incumbents who run, saying they're running on their record of the last 4 years, and of course looking forward to the next 4 as well. But is it enough as an incumbent to say, I'm running on my record, I'm running on, what I've achieved, or do they always need to be kind of proposing fresh, new ideas?
I would say no. And the reason for that would be let's say Sandra Masters came in 2020 on the platform. So I believe the continuation of the work, you don't have enough time to do something within this short period, especially with the pandemic. COVID 2 years, there's not enough time to actually do anything, even to turn that tractor around on your narrow street. So it's difficult to pinpoint what's going on, what the people are asking for. Andrew said, could be anti-something, like you heard, going to vote not for someone but against someone. And we never heard that before. It's how do you figure that out? How do you pinpoint that? So her record speaks. When you think about 70% of the time when on council we voted together at issues together. So that's a good record. So really, what are the people looking for? Are they looking for change? What is the change? They're actually people understanding what they're asking for? Do they know what the change they want? Some want pool, some don't want a pool, some don't want libraries, some want this, some want roads. But in a bigger picture, it's I like to know what the population thought of why they voted that way. I know we'll probably find out sometimes, but so I don't see that you have to change some things. You can't just switch your ideas at the turn of the table to say, now I'm going this direction. Well, then obviously you don't know what you want to do. So you have to stick with this thing. 15 years on it, you always do this. No, so you go progressions in dealing with, as you're dealing with mayor, second mayor, and then different councils, different colleagues, your next best friends, everything, and you continuously work on that as a whole city to achieve something. Sometimes I was so excited that I achieved 1% decrease in the mill rate on the base water utility, right? 15 years, I finally got it, right? So it's work in progress, right? It's work in progress. Like Miriam said, you're drinking from a fire hydrant, right? And don't know, ask the people. I would like to know the exit poll to say what people were thinking.
Well, that's the thing. I think we should start treating it like a school assignment where people write down, why did you vote for X candidate? Wouldn't that be fun? And then you could read through all the responses. Yeah, but Andrew, I think a lot of people have kind of looked at Lori Bresciani and Sandra Masters, the two people on council, and maybe kind of lump them together when they're looking at the candidates, whether they want to vote for them or don't want to vote for them. Do you think they did, specifically, I think Sandra Masters, did she do a good enough job kind of differentiating herself from Lori, and did Lori do a good enough job kind of differentiating herself from the incumbent mayor?
It's a good question. I think my read of it is Mayor Masters ran on her commitment that she made in 2020, which hasn't really changed, right? So what's interesting is she's attempted to carry through with what she promised to do. And she has put that back on the table to advance it further, recognizing there's work to be done, and she wants to do it in another term. My sense at the same time is Lori ran against Sandra. And Chad, it seems, is running for the mayoral position and not against anybody. He's putting out there, this is the stuff that I want to do. Here's my expertise. The platform is a bit more vague compared to some of the incumbents for obvious reasons. I actually would put Bill Pratt in there. They're running against each other. So Bill Pratt wants to do things differently from a leadership standpoint. So maybe that's where they're getting tied together, is that there's three people running against each other and one person running for mayor in a very distinct fashion.
Can that be more of a disadvantage, do you think, or an advantage when people start to tie people together in groups like that?
I don't know. Well, we're seeing it right now, right? I'm just speculating based on those numbers and how those folks are collaborating, but they're running against each other in very explicit ways. Bill Pratt has made his message, I can bring people together where Sandra and Lori could not. And Chad just seems to be running for better management of city services and advancing programs that I think some of us have already agreed to, but he could suggest to the public that he can do it better. He might have certain social connections, networks, et cetera, that are providing some amplification of it. But when someone comes out of nowhere, that's really telling. And so is he a protest vote against all three of those? I can't say for certain, but it is really intriguing that someone that's a complete outsider, by measure of their involvement with civic affairs, is coming up as strong as they are.
It certainly seems to be something that people are resonating with, at least with the results that we're seeing so far. And we are going to head back up to Saskatoon, where we will join Stephanie Massicotte once again.
Thank you, Ethan. And we are still waiting for some more numbers to roll in. We saw some numbers from the advanced polls, and it showed Cynthia Block leading ever so slightly by just under 2,000 votes. What does that say, Marin, about the campaign that she ran and the campaigns of Gordon Don as well?
You know, it's an early indication that at least with those first batch of voters, that her messages were resonating. You know, it's difficult, and Councillor Stevens was just mentioning something similar. When you've got a number of people sort of vying for that change vote or that anti-incumbent vote, and really trying to gain political capital from the same issues, in many ways, Wyant and Atchison and Tarasoff were competing with each other for votes, in as much as they were competing with Councillor Block for votes. So it's a piece of the pie that's available, and then there's an undecided vote, and then there's the constituency that's generally happy with the direction of the city and doesn't want to see huge changes. And so I think what we may see is, divvying up that piece of the pie. That anti-incumbent and change sentiment may not have been big enough to see one candidate emerge successful from that side of the spectrum. It'll be interesting to see in the final analysis if any candidate gains 50% of the vote, or how close they get to 50% of the vote, and whether or not that sort of splitting of the anti-incumbent or change sentiment is a challenge in getting one of those people into the mayor's chair.
All right, thank you, Marion. I think that we actually do have some new numbers. We'll get to those in just a minute, but let's go back to exactly what you were saying. In 2020, we did see that. We did see Charlie Clark with pretty much 50% of the vote, and then two candidates split that vote. Do you think we're going to see that again?
I think it's certainly possible. I think, there was certainly quite a bit of overlap in messaging, I would say, from some of the campaigns, the gentlemen who were running. Certainly every campaign spent quite a bit of time talking about public safety, homelessness and housing, crime. But I think what we observed from Mr. Wyant's campaign and from Don Atchison's campaign and Mr. Tarasoff's campaign is that there was quite a bit of rhetoric around the ways in which the city was not working properly, the community being broken. And so I'm sure that message will resonate with voters. The question is, will it resonate with more than 50% of voters in order to get one of those people over the line? And I think Cynthia Block's campaign, that messaging was more about, how do we build sort of on the successes we have as a community, how do we bring the community together? And so fundamentally sort of different ways of looking at the problems and the challenges that the city is faced with. And I think the challenge, is that anti-incumbent sort of angry or dissatisfied vote. It's certainly strong. Those are committed voters. Those are people who feel very strongly, but there may not be the same amount of room to grow with that type of rhetoric or vision. So we'll have to see what happens. It's very possible that one of those candidates will emerge successful. But, I think we'll see. This is not a tremendous lead, but it is enough of a lead that if she is able to sort of incrementally build on that, she could succeed tonight.
All right, well, Marion, I think that we do have some new numbers now, at least for the top three candidates. You can see Cynthia Block now at just over 9,000 votes. She is currently leading. Gord Wyant just behind her at a little over 7,000 votes. And then Don Atchison still there in third place with just over 3,000 votes. Marion, what are your thoughts on those numbers? Still a tight race. Still too close for Cynthia to sit back.
Absolutely, and I'm not totally sure what we're seeing here. I think we're seeing advanced polls and maybe some other special polls. So we're essentially seeing the ratios or the proportions from that early advanced poll. They're continuing here. Not a lot of shifting happening, but also Cynthia is not broadening her lead, and so I think we'll have to keep watching. If these are in fact the early polls, the special polls, the hospital polls, then what we've been talking about will I think continue to be the thing to watch, which is what do things look like when those neighborhood polls start to come into play, and how are individual neighborhoods voting, and that's where we could see things either that lead could grow or things could shift pretty substantially depending on how people voted today.
Well, we are still waiting for those numbers to come in, but I believe that our friends in Regina have some more new results rolling in. So Ethan, I'll throw things back to you.
Yeah, slowly but steadily, Stephanie, we're starting to see those pile in here in Regina. And I can tell you that we now have 33 of 43 polls reporting And Chad Baczynski, each time that we have come to these results, he has been increasing his lead over his next contender, and he continues to hold on to the lead in Regina. Just shy of 12,500 votes for Chad Baczynski. His next competitor is Lori Bresciani, again, outgoing Ward 4 councillor. She has been serving since 2016, and she is now just shy of 9,400 votes. And Sandra Masters, again, kind of maintaining that same distance that she had been between her and Lori throughout the last little bit of the evening here. She has just over 9,000 votes. Bill Pratt has pulled up to just over 5,000. And again, Chad Baczynski in the lead this evening in Regina. And again, 33 of 43 polls reporting. Want to bring back our panel here with us. Andrew Stevens, John Findura, outgoing councillors in the city of Regina. Andrew, we don't really talk about vote splitting all that much when it comes to municipal politics as much as we do maybe provincial or federal. But we talked about how maybe Sandra Masters, Lori Bresciani kind of looped together since they were on council. Do you think this may be a case of where someone like Chad Baczynski came up the middle and the votes were split between Lori and Sandra because their results are still pretty close together right now?
That seems to be what those numbers are saying. So in other words, if Lori or Sandra hadn't run, would be, a close tie between Chad and one of the two. That seems to be the case. So that's kind of suggesting they're vying for the same pocket of votes. Anecdotally, those who might identify as a quote-unquote progressive voter, I was hearing more and more in the community that Chad was taking on those votes. So that might be also what's interesting here is not unlike Sandra's win in 2020, there might be a cross-section of folks who otherwise would be split between a variety of different political parties are seeing someone or something in the individual who's ahead here. So that might be the case. They're trying to claim the same pocket of votes, and Chad might be taking votes from different communities and constituencies and stakeholders that the others may have ignored.
John, I'm curious, I know obviously you're not running on the campaign trail this time around, but just within your circles and what you'd been hearing, had you been hearing anything specifically about Chad Baczynski or about what he was all about?
Honestly, no. Just, read his literature and see some of the, billboards and all that, and that's about it. I didn't hear anything, not that I got disengaged, but life happens, right? For myself as a outgoing councillor. No, I didn't hear very much of there was some discussion about Chad, but I think you have to take the tone from what Andrew was saying in Saskatoon as well, is packaging everybody together and then one person moves up, not necessarily split, and we talked about, you heard on the not a campaign trail, but in a voting line where folks saying, I'm coming in to vote to get against someone, not for someone. So, because we actually brought up for the last 2 years to say after the pandemic, a lot of projects. And so, and there is that either a fear of folks wondering, oh my goodness, all this stuff's happening, the taxes but folks don't realize you need to grow. And growth, there's a pain in growth, there's a cost to the growth. And some of the things like so folks are talking to me about, well, maybe we don't need this. Well, okay, we said that 15 years ago that we didn't need this, and we're here today, we need it, but we should have done it back then. So I'm thinking it's the package of three, and then one's moving up. I'm not necessarily split, but I would say split is there. But I think the folks are looking for, like you said, it's anti-incumbent thing, I think, was happening. So what I will say is probably seeing a little deeper once we see the words come in. And we have a few incumbents there. We'll see how they're faring. So maybe we can calculate that to what's happening on a mayoral race. Maybe. And that's something the question needs to be asked, I believe, is, see, was it this against the incumbent? Because there are six open seats, correct? Mm-hmm. So there's a pretty big hole. So what happens, how the other councillor that's running for re-election, would that tell us a story of how the mayoral things went? Mm-hmm. That's, it's a question I would have, right, or I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and I should note that we are going to bring you up to speed on where councillors sit right now and where those council races are in just a bit. Of course, our primary focus for the moment is on the mayor race. And speaking of, we're going to learn a little bit more about that up in Saskatoon, and we'll rejoin Stephanie Massicotte.
Thank you so much, Ethan. We are still waiting for numbers. They are slowly rolling in for us here in Saskatoon. But I want to take a little break from the numbers, Marin, and just talk about what's ahead for council. We mentioned, we're going to have a new mayor. We're going to have at least 5 new city councillors. A lot of big projects still on the line. What are your thoughts on those moving forward and the future of those big projects?
It will be really interesting to see what happens, I think in particular with the conversation and the process surrounding the downtown event and entertainment district. As I mentioned earlier, when there are times of economic anxiety, inflation, housing affordability issue, these kinds of mega projects are very difficult to advance. The challenge that council is going to have in talking about the downtown event and entertainment district is if they choose not to proceed with this project, they are going to have to figure out how to repair and renovate the SaskTel Center because that facility is nearing the end of its useful life. And so these conversations and these debates are never quite as simple as yes or no. And so if there is a majority of council elected that wishes to not proceed, at least in the short term with that project, they're going to have to pivot to a different way to solve that problem. There's always and often rhetoric around the new library project. I do think it's worth emphasizing that project is underway. Shovels are in the ground, construction is underway. It is also not a project that is controlled by City Council. It is overseen by the library board. And so as much as there's public sentiment, which is concerned or opposed to that to some degree, that is not a topic or a project which I think this new council will have any debate over other than in the form of annual budgets. So they'll have to, as I mentioned earlier, the sort of most immediate challenge is going to be sorting out budget. But then I think these big projects and longer term things like BRT and the growth plan, we've heard a lot of people campaigning, expressing dissatisfaction with half and those changes. I think you might see some candidates try to rescind or reconsider decisions of a previous council. But I'm not confident that will ultimately win the day just because of the momentum that's been generated on some of those topics and the difficulty in reversing course on a major project. You have to think of an alternative if you're not going to proceed with these things.
I do want to talk about this a little bit more, but first we're going to throw things back over to CBC's Charles Hamilton, who is live at City Hall. A little bit of confusion, as numbers are slowly coming in, a discrepancy in some numbers online versus what we're saying. Can you explain to us, Charles, what is going on?
I can try. So what is going on right now? It's this kind of weird process. So this board behind me, they are posting kind of poll by poll results, and the advanced polls are all up there. But when I'm talking to some city officials here, the people who are in charge of getting those numbers up, they say that just the volume of advanced polls was higher than they expected. Obviously, they don't crack those open until the polls close at 8 o'clock, and they basically just say that it's taking more time to get these sort of receipt-looking things that I'm seeing posted from these boards up onto the internet, and that'll obviously give us totals. So, yeah, it's a bit of a weird scene here. Lots of kind of impatient people, lots of journalists scurrying around, figuring out what we're going to talk about because we have no actual numbers, or I should say no actual numbers. We have a few actual numbers, but I am being reassured that in the coming, I'm going to say minutes, but could be longer than that. We are going to have more and more results. I can see just to my right over there that they are still tabulating results. So they are still taking all of those computers, those tabulation machines from polls. They are bringing them to City Hall. They are being counted. Some of them are being posted receipt style up on this board. And like you can see, some of them are making it onto the website, but it's kind of a confusing process. I think not only for us and the audience, but also for some of the people in charge here. They're kind of wondering why it's taking so long. But as soon as I find out, I'll let you know. Stephanie?
Thank you, Charles. I think maybe we jinxed ourselves by saying we'll have results super early.
And we have to get up early in the morning.
That is true,
That's
Charles
the other
and
thing.
Charles and I will be on Saskatoon Morning in the morning tomorrow. That was Charles Hamilton, of course, live from City Hall. Marin, you've been through your share of elections. Is this normal? What's happening?
I would say no. I think the thing that is atypical here is that typically the results are posted in real life and online concurrently. And as we heard explained earlier, there's been some reluctance to post online results while people are still voting. And we see this happen at the federal level with elections all the time. You don't want to let people know what the results are before they've cast their ballot. So it is atypical, but I also think there is no normal anymore. Our last election happened over the course of 2 days. Before that, we didn't have nearly the same kinds of voting that we have now. So every election is sort of its own unique entity. And the people who run these events learn from these kinds of episodes and plan for the next one. But there's always some element of surprise, I would say. And so I think what's going to happen is once the results are in, they will all be in very quickly. But we are starting to see some evidence on the City of Saskatoon's website that those neighborhood polls are starting to come in. We're seeing some results now from the individual ward races, and so that tells me they're beginning to tabulate things beyond the advance poll numbers.
You have, like I mentioned, been through your fair share of elections. I know you're not seeking re-election this year, but you've been in the shoes of many of these people who are running for council, maybe not running for mayor, but no. What's going on in their minds right now? How do you think they're feeling?
This is a very anxious time. I mean, when you're undertaking an effort like this, it takes support from your family and your friends and your community, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of money, and you just want to get to that end of the line and find out what's happening, no matter what the results are. And so this is a very difficult situation for candidates to be in. It is not typical for it to take this long. Usually we knew within an hour to an hour and a half of polls closing what our fate was. And so I'm really feeling for all of those candidates who have put in a marathon, and to paraphrase the words of the mayor in the Star Phoenix today, that they ran a marathon and then they have to find out they have 5 more miles to go. So it's a really tough pill to swallow, to be waiting, but I do think we're going to start to see those results quickly now, and I say that aspirationally, but otherwise you're going to have to just stay here all night and be ready for the morning. Yeah, exactly. Let's keep it going.
Exactly, yeah. We'll just keep you here and have you on tomorrow morning.
Sounds
too.
Good.
Well, we are, thank you, Marin, by the way. We are over 2 hours now since the polls have closed. Still waiting for results here in Saskatoon. They're slowly rolling in, but Regina has some new numbers to share with us, so I'll throw things back over to Ethan Williams. Ethan?
Yeah, I don't know what bad karma you guys have in Saskatoon for making this happen, but don't send it down here. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And yes, we do have some more results coming in for Regina in the mayoral race. Chad Baczynski just shy of 13,000 votes. That is about 3,000 votes ahead now of his next competitor, Lori Bresciani. Bresciani and Masters, that gap starting to widen a little bit between them. At one point, they were just about 7 or 8 votes away from each other, and now a good 400 or so votes separate them. Bill Pratt has been in 4th place all night. He has not moved much from that 5,000 mark since the last time we checked. We've been talking a lot tonight about incumbency and just kind of how incumbents are not exactly faring all that well. I can tell you in the Regina City Council races where incumbents are sitting, we're looking at Ward 2, for instance, Bob Hawkins. He is losing by about 50 votes right now to his next challenger, that's George Sickles. In Ward 7, that is Tarina Nelson. She is losing by about 107 votes to her challenger, Shabna Radins. That's a rematch of, well, actually both Hawkins and Radins, that's a rematch from 2020. I can tell you, though, Shannon Zakidniak, the only incumbent Regina City Councillor that has a fairly safe lead at this point. She's over 400 votes ahead of her next challenger, Alex Tack. That is also a rematch from 2020, sensing a pattern here. And Ward 9, Jason Mancinelli, he is winning by only a slight margin, just 21 votes over Tanis Wilder in Ward 9. Andrew Stevens, 3 of the 4 incumbents right now, or I guess, well, 3 if you include Mancinelli. That's a pretty close race, but 2 for sure falling behind. Is that something that's surprising to you?
No, and I think what's interesting is you couldn't find a more different group of people. They might be incumbents, but different communities. You know, what's going on in Ward 2, like the intensity of the right wing and what they were trying to accomplish. Andrew Scheer out in doorsteps for the candidate who seems to be coming on the lead. So Advanced Regina really targeted a lot of energy there. Yeah, I mean, there's a natural frustration with incumbents, but it's kind of wild in terms of who's overtaking them, and the kind of political stripes that they have is all over the map there. But it's the fact that it's so close is really interesting, and it's going to be a nail biter by the sounds of it, right to the end.
John, are these anything surprising you out of these results so far?
No, I think we wanted to see that. It's showing, telling a story of incumbent. It seems like the folks, again, repeat it. We will repeat it. People going in to vote to get someone out. How do you manage that? Doesn't matter how many times you're at the doorstep. You could circumnavigate the riding 3 times, and you're still not going to get into the point where you want to go to the finish line and getting a win. But it's surprising, but not surprising. Like Andrew said, diverse individuals at council. We come in individuals, and it's a good mix in the fabric of how we do things. We're not the same. We come with, as long as you don't come in with a suitcase full of things, promises, or whatever, you do okay. But I'm seeing that this is what's the theme, as is happening in the mayoral race, is happening on the council with the incumbent hearing from the because again, the large projects, all these little things that we've been doing. So this is where someone's for, someone is against. So it's kind of coming together, mayoral race and the incumbents council coming together.
Yeah.
So.
Very interesting to watch. I should mention that we are waiting to hear from Sandra Masters. She apparently is, as you heard earlier in the program from Adam Hunter, she will be speaking with media tonight, and we are told that she will be doing that sometime shortly here. And in fact, it looks like, not yet. She is still in the room awaiting. I thought maybe we would have her walking out there, but not as of this point. That is where she will be speaking. And again, we have our Adam Hunter live at the Atlas Hotel in Regina to be covering that in hopefully shortly, in just a few minutes. Andrew Stevens, something interesting that you brought up a little earlier in the evening, and it goes kind of along with voting and maybe some exit polling, but we don't really have polling in general when it comes to municipal elections. Is that something that you think might be beneficial?
I think if we're going to take it seriously, we've seen organizations secretly funded, pumping money into this, doing some polls. I'm not actually seeing those polls come to fruition with these numbers, but the night is young. If we're going to take it seriously and we want different kinds of contenders and we want people that will develop really robust platforms that are clear, they're honest, if we want the kind of resources marshaled to make the election process a lot more serious, then maybe we should devote a little bit more time to it. And maybe it's just a general lack of interest in the academic world with this level of government. There are a few people that pay attention to it, but it's so important. And I think it doesn't have the same kind of appeal as a provincial or a national election, but just think of the significance of it. And let's take seriously, and I think that's what residents are saying, is that these infrastructure gaps are important. We want them addressed. Councils have successively ignored them. Well, that means we have to talk about the quality of the contenders. And as the councillor from Saskatoon said, not all of them are serious. That's fine. But maybe we should make it the case where you have to be a serious contender. And what would that environment look like, where you're willing to do this as a full-time gig? you're willing to give up for a period of your life another form of employment. That's going to be tough to do. But I think the seriousness is impacting people, and they're seeing it, and I think they're turning out and they're taking it quite seriously with the measure of the votes and the fact that it's now a couple hours after technically it closed and folks are still lined up.
You mentioned the polling that we've been seeing from some third-party groups, Advance Regina being one of those that did send out a version of their poll, who they were kind of seeing as was going to be voting. They also sent out a mailer with sort of candidates that I guess they want to see be elected. But then some of these candidates were coming out and, okay, actually, right before we do that, we have some new numbers to look at in Regina. So we're going to take a look at, this is 38 of 43 polls reporting. So we are coming very close to the end of the polls in Regina. And Chad Bashinsky now with, again, an almost 3,000 vote lead over Lori Bresciani. Sandra Masters now continuing to fall behind Bresciani. That is a nearly 700 vote gap between the two of them. And again, Bill Pratt has been sitting around that 5,000, 5,500 mark for the last little while. Should note, of course, that's not all the mayoral candidates that we have running in Regina. There is 11 in total, and essentially all the rest of them are behind, or in some cases well behind, what you're seeing there on the screen. And so we're just showing you the top 4 contenders that we have in Regina. Andrew Stevens, just coming back a little bit to Advance Regina and the polls that they'd been putting out. And then we're seeing some of these candidates coming out and saying that, you know, actually I'm not endorsed. I don't support what Advance Regina is saying. I'm not funded by these people. What do you make of all that?
I think some of it was crocodile tears. I think they didn't like the negative connotation. I think maybe in principle they didn't appreciate how there was active political and partisan engagement. But, you know, your platform is representative of this right-wing organization and its values. So spare me the media coverage of, oh, I got this endorsement and I don't like it. I think that's a bit thin. The other dynamic here that we're not talking about is the school board, which I think should be looked at a little bit more rigorously because the turnout there is even lower. It means that you go and vote for a mayor and councillor, you will consciously not vote for a school trustee. I think Arcan and others have made it a real priority to politicize in very awful ways the school boards. So I think that's another element that we're looking at here. But you know, it does kind of please me to see some of those right-wing attempts fall flat on their face in some of these wards. We're seeing awesome folks like Shannon Zakidniak. I think Victoria Flores was doing quite well in some other polls. I think it's a real positive sign that people have bucked those trends, but I think it's still a concern to see that kind of influence and the interest that is getting wealthy people into City Hall again. That was ultimately their intention. I think we should generally be concerned about it and how it's manipulating with backdoor money the outcome of an election.
Advance Regina, Common Sense Regina, you know, they are two kind of advocacy organizations that want to see, you know, candidates get in. But there have also been, you know, polls or surveys that have been put out by other interest groups in Regina, Rally Around Homelessness, Bike Regina. So what's the difference then, Andrew, between, you know, organizations like that and what we're seeing with Advance Regina?
It's a great question. So if you're a candidate and you're a serious candidate, you've effectively written a book by the end of that cycle because you've answered so many surveys. Rally Against Homelessness, for instance, was asking really rigorous questions. I welcome that. I think it's great. They have a clear focus. They put out a report card. In some cases, they just show you without any edits what people have said. That's great. That's a transparency question. Bike Regina, you don't have to guess very much about what Bike Regina is about, and they provide a report card. I know those individuals. If you think of organized labor, you can find elected officials and others who are writing checks. That's a very transparent public process. Who is Common Sense Regina? Is it an issue that it's an Alberta think tank that's mustering this, that it's campaign managers for federal conservative politicians and their financial donors who have explicitly said that they're too much of a coward to come out in public and say who they are because they might suffer some backlash? John and I put our names out there, and we deal with the public in a very honest and transparent way. A lot of those other third-party organizations do the same. This is a malicious attempt to get particular interests in City Hall because they feel like they've been removed, or because this or that elected official at the federal level doesn't like what he considers to be woke issues. So it's manipulative, it's deceitful. I think it's cowardice in terms of how they cloak themselves in a different intention. That is what the big difference is, I would argue.
John, do you feel the same way, or do you feel that there's kind of some shady business going on there, or are these groups, do they have legitimate concerns?
Before I go there, I'd like to just steer away from politics. My 5-year-old grandson is watching, right? I want to wave to him. I mean, this young man, right? He's watching his grandpa on TV, so I want to say shout out to him, right? I've got, but he's quite the character. So. Hunter, how you doing, buddy? Good night. Go to bed. There you go. But I think it confuses all of that swirling noise that's around confuses the voters. What the real issues that the council can achieve, and what are we there as council? Once you land into that seat, you have one vote, and you can have one shift, and all the things that you come with, all out the window. You don't get anywhere. You don't get the 6 votes. You're done. And so I think it's the noise of someone trying to push someone in because they don't like something or other. I don't believe that kind of a politics on the local level is necessary or should be a part of it. People should be educated on the reality of what touches you. The water's not coming to my house. The water's not leaving my house. My roads, my sidewalks. Can I play in the park? Is it safe when I go downtown? Save my neighborhood. So all of these things, traffic, speeding, all those things, those are the core issues that city and the council should be concentrating. We need a pool. We need a library. We need all these things. And this is the discussion's been going on for 20 plus years about these things. Of course, I mean, right now, and this is what the people are saying, this is probably the vote about incumbents and what we have put forward in front of us. It's kind of people saying to the incumbents, we don't want that right now, maybe, right? And so, but we're going to have to do it sometimes, regardless. So my interest will be watching the next 4 years and see how the council reacts and how the council acts and what they are going to achieve with the administration and the council, to see where their guts are going to be and where the bravery is going to come up to say, I'm willing to do this. It's okay to run for something. Once you get into that seat, it becomes very hot. Doesn't have a trigger on it, but it's hot.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Yeah, certainly has been an issue that's been dominating Regina politics. And in terms of Regina mayoral results, well, we are sitting fairly similarly to where we were just shortly ago here. I think 38 of 43 polls, just a few more polls yet to come here in this election in Regina. Again, Chad Baczynski, if you are just joining us, and Chad Baczynski has been ahead all night since the beginning, since the first results, and he has increased his lead again over Lori Bresciani. First was a lead over Sandra Masters. Now it's a lead over Lori Bresciani, about 3,000 votes or so separating them there. Just again, an update on a couple of some pretty tight council races right now that we are watching here in Regina as well. Dan Rasevich, former Saskatchewan Rough Rider, now pulling ahead of Joanne Crawford in Ward 1. That is about by 200 votes that is happening right now. And we've been watching Ward 9, which is incumbent Jason Mancinelli. That ward has not changed in the last little while here. Jason's still ahead by about 20 votes or so over Tanis Wilder. And we have been also watching Bob Hawkins in Ward 2. Hawkins serving on council since 2012, and he is again losing to his challenger George Sickleys in Ward 2 by about 50 votes or so. So some very interesting numbers coming in there. Andrew, I want to talk a little bit about just this last council term, because not only was there a lot going on in terms of, what was coming up in terms of projects, and we had the Catalyst Committee and lots of kind of excitement on that front, but it was at times a divisive and could be a bit of some challenging personalities on council. You mentioned that this kind of term was a little more challenging than what you saw in 2016. What kind of stood out for you?
When we first got elected, I think everybody, and I think they were till the very end, was really committed to doing things differently, including folks like John, who were incumbents who had been there a long time. And so I think you naturally get change and change orientation, and conflict's going to come with it. And then you add on certain personalities and then political differences. And I think we wanted to solve the same kind of issues, but we wanted to do it in very radically different ways. And then you add some personality conflicts on there and meaningful political differences here or there. And it creates challenges and conflict that can make it difficult to come to agreement on issues that should otherwise be pretty simple. As John mentioned, I think we clocked the actual times that we voted unanimously together, and it was about between 70 and 80%. So for the most part, we were actually getting along. But sometimes in the public's eye, certainly, and certainly at council, those differences can overshadow possibilities of agreement, and it can really change the mood in a room. I think there were some delegates who came to speak to certain issues, and it was almost like walking into a room when you were a kid and your parents might have been fighting. And, like you could tell there was an argument and there was a vibe there and it wasn't good. That's just the way some delegate kind of described it. And, I think that would be a major regret, is to be part of that or allowed to be amplified, even though conflict is going to be normal. At some point it becomes a bit too much and it consumes you, and it can create animosity that is a bit too far when it comes to the fact that you have to get along with somebody even if you've disagreed with them, and for the most part we do. If you can't, it makes it very difficult to actually work together, to talk, to speak in confidence with each other. So I'd say the task of a mayor now is to learn from that. Whether it's a returning mayor or a brand new mayor, I think having weekly meetings just to converse, 2 hours just to update. You're going to be part of so many committees. Let's get together. It's a private session. Just admit it. You don't make any decisions, but we're just going to have conversations. And we're going to talk about, in very candid ways, how we want to proceed. I would say I would do that every 2 weeks. And then you don't make and cook decisions, but at the very least, you can kind of get that tension out of the room, and then dialogue where you can't at the Henry Baker Hall Council Chamber. And then you get into an official capacity to make decisions. And I think a far more responsible and mature way.
Okay, well, we have, if you're just joining us, we've been waiting for results from both Regina and Saskatoon all night long, but we're going to head to Alexander Kwan, who is at Regina City Hall, with an update.
Hi, Ethan. Yeah, I'm still here at Regina City Hall. Now, polls are still coming in, but we have been told that incumbent Mayor Sandra Masters is now calling Chad Baczynski, the candidate that's now leading in the mayoral race. If polls stand as they are, we are expecting Chad Baczynski to come down here to City Hall in about 20 minutes or so, where he would be giving his first speech to media, first interview with media in about 20 to 25 minutes as mayor-elect. So we will have more soon. Polls are still coming in, but we are hearing that incumbent Mayor Sandra Masters is calling candidate Chad Baczynski to concede, presumably, but we will have more for you in just a little bit. Ethan?
Okay, thanks very much, Alex. And a reminder that we are waiting to hear from Sandra Masters at her watch party tonight at the Atlas Hotel in Regina. That's what's happening here. Let's check in and see if we have any updates in Saskatoon with Stephanie Massicotte.
Thank you, Ethan. And I hear that we do have some new numbers here in Saskatoon. We've been anxiously awaiting. You can see Cynthia Block there is still polling ahead with over 13,000 votes. Gord Wyant sitting just behind her at 9,000, a little over 9,000, and then Don Atchison still sitting in third with just over 4,500. So you can see that is a difference of close to 4,000 votes, I should say. That is 30 of 82 polls reporting. I do want to mention that there is still a lot of polls to come in, but Seems like a pretty decent lead there. We can see those long receipts that Charles was talking about. It does look like a pretty fun night at the restaurant, but still waiting for those to be tabulated. And we, of course, will bring you those updated numbers as they come. Looks bustling down there at City Hall. I kind of wish I was down there, but I'm here with Maren Lowen, and I'm so happy to have you. Thoughts on those most recent numbers?
So we're seeing that initial lead that Cynthia Block had over Gord Wyant is not being eroded as more polls come in. So if I'm in Cynthia's room right now, I'm starting to feel more cautiously optimistic that lead will be sustained even as more polls come in. It's really difficult to make too many guesses until we get almost to that 50% mark in terms of polls reporting. As I said, every poll is different and can shift things in a different way. But I think certainly a good sign for her camp that the lead is not eroding with the election day votes coming in. For people who are wondering what those long receipts are, those are the printouts of the tabulator machines. Those actually show you poll by poll on a ward basis what the numbers are. So definitely looks like a fun night out. Or if you really love politics, it's also a fun night out.
Yeah.
And so I think we should start to have a good sense as well now about where some of those ward races sit. Because as polls come in from around the city, it'll give us a sense of each of those council races starting to shape up as well.
Now, it is still too close to call, as we mentioned, only 30 of 82 polls reporting, but I do just want to talk about Cynthia Block for a minute, because if she were to win this election, she would become the first female mayor of our city. As a woman who has sat on council before, what would that mean for our city and for council?
Well, I think it would be a long overdue milestone. It is, quite remarkable, and not in a positive way, that we have never had a woman in the mayor's chair, and there have been lots of people who have tried. And so I think it's important to also pay tribute to those people who are trailblazers in seeking the mayor's chair. I will say, I think that having a gender balance on council has been really important, and it has been actually a unique feature of Saskatoon's council. When we look across the country, typically local governments, local councils are disproportionately male, and they also tend to not be demographically representative of the community. They tend to be whiter than the communities that they represent. And so I think it would be really interesting to watch tonight. Not only will we have our first female mayor potentially, but how might the makeup of council change to represent an increasingly diverse city. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. And as I mentioned, this is not unique to Saskatoon or to Saskatchewan. This is a nationwide thing. It is a very difficult order of government to achieve that sort of demographic representation. And so it'll be interesting to watch not just the mayor's chair, but the makeup of council in general tonight.
I do want to talk about that more in just a little bit, but first we're going to throw things back over to Ethan Williams in Regina. Ethan?
Yeah, thanks very much, Stephanie. And if you have just joined us in Regina, we have heard from our Alexander Kwan at City Hall that Sandra Masters is reportedly calling Chad Baczynski supposedly to concede the mayoral race. So again, Sandra Masters possibly calling Chad Baczynski to concede the race. We do have the rest. It looks like these are all of the rest of the results for the Regina mayoral race. All polls now reporting, and this is likely why we're hearing the news that Sandra Masters is making that call, because Chad Baczynski, with a healthy lead now over his next contender, Lori Bresciani, about 3,000 votes separating them. Sandra Masters, incumbent mayor, she has been in third place for the last while now. And again, that margin between her and Lori Bresciani has been growing steadily through the evening. And as you can see, just shy of 800 votes separating the two of them. Bill Pratt now getting closer to that 6,000 mark, but at about 5,800 votes or so. Again, we do have many more candidates who are running in the Regina race. There's 11 in total. But we are just showing you the top four that we have there on the screen. Okay, time to bring our panel back in. Two gentlemen who will not be returning to City Council but have graciously joined us here tonight. Andrew Stevens, outgoing Ward 3 City Councillor. John Findura, outgoing Ward 5 City Councillor. That looks to be, Andrew, the final results that we have from Regina. We're hearing now that Sandra Masters is making that call, supposedly to concede the race. We are still waiting to hear from her. Your thoughts on what looks to be a new mayor for Regina?
Yeah, you know, the election's kind of wild. I wasn't really sure what to expect when it was called. So the fact that you have more people that seem to be showing up, there's a different dynamic. I think it's kind of it was actually an exciting election for all of the issues with third parties. I've lived here since 2012. This is probably the most interesting for a variety of reasons, and I think most of them are good. So, you know, this new mayor is going to have a lot of work ahead of them. We'll see what happens with the council, but that's a big factor. Don't let anybody tell you that mayors just have that one vote. They wield an incredible amount of influence inside of City Hall. They're the contact with different levels of government, the federal government, province, you name it. But when it comes to the council policy making, they're going to have to reach a 6-5 agreement at the very least to advance whatever kind of initiatives that they wish. So their capacity to succeed with whatever it is they want to advance is going to be contingent on what we see with the council outcomes.
Yeah, and we are watching those council races as well, I should note. John, you know, a lot of the circles that we had kind of been hearing from were saying this was likely going to come down to a race between Sandra Masters and, well, speaking of Sandra Masters, she is arriving now at the Atlas Hotel, and let's listen in and hear from her.
I left my beer over there. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Sandra, did you have a statement, or do you want to just ask questions?
Just ask questions, yeah.
What's your reaction to tonight's result?
You know, I think that the residents of Regina voted for change pretty much kind of across the board, as it would appear. I think we'll have 1, maybe 2 returning councillors. And so, you know, I think it's indicative of some of the other things we've seen in the city and just even kind of across North America, so to speak.
How are you doing personally?
I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't a little bit relieved in a way. You know, you get a life back. I'd like to think I'm still employable in some respects. You know, I called Chad and I congratulated him, and I think he's a smart man, and so it will not be without its challenges. But in terms of, you know, faith in clearly the support that's out there for him as it relates to 30% of the population or 31% of the population, I think he's, you know, we've got a lot of work to do at the city. But again, he's an intelligent man, so yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it.
What did you make of the results tonight?
Probably the mayoral race specifically, probably we knew the vote was going to be split. We knew the numbers were going to be split. We knew that probably months ago, and so yeah, I think Chad spoke about just, you know, the practicality of infrastructure, and there's some major projects that are underway. So yeah, I think it'll be fine.
So would you like to see the next mayor follow through on that, something that you started?
Oh gosh, the Audit and Finance Committee, in terms of the proper reporting from the City of Regina, for sure. The infrastructure coordination that's been underway, and that needs to continue and kind of cascade down into the smaller projects. And clearly the pool project, as well as the debt set aside for the library. Those things have been waiting in the wings for over a decade. And so really to see those through over the next 4 years would be good for the city.
A lot has been made of these third parties that were involved in this campaign, and you were the target, and some of the other councillors were the target of these campaigns. What's your response to that now that the results have come out?
Yeah, for the most part, I have just tried to ignore them for the most part. I think that perhaps they worked.
Do you have any messages for the people of Regina, who you served for the last 4 years?
Oh gosh, it was an honor and privilege to serve the citizens of Regina. Like, truly the honor of a lifetime. And in terms of the relationships developed, and it doesn't matter if it's business organizations or our tourism sites, you know, from the Science Center to the new IW to all of the other, you know, the relationships with First Nations chiefs that I've been able to develop. Just, again, the privilege of a lifetime. Supporting the military, local folks, supporting, you know, our first responders. I couldn't have asked for a better job for the last 4 years.
What do you say about your supporters here tonight that came to...
They're just the best people. I did call Chad and I let him know that he can reach out as soon as he wants to, so I can start downloading some of the information in terms of the relationships that are in play and that he'll want to pay special attention to, because they really are the organizations and the volunteers, from boards of directors to just all of the community groups that we have, just really looking for making sure that there's connection with the mayor's office, because the mayor does advocate to both levels of government, and as well, again, with First Nations, with Métis, and with all of the good work that is happening in the city by folks outside of the city, organization, really making sure that those relationships kind of get picked up and passed along is really important for these folks, because they're amazing people.
What advice did you give Chad Baczynski?
Actually, all I said was this was my personal cell phone number and he could reach out as soon as he wanted to, and I would have him up to the office and start downloading anything he wanted to know. I'd be happy to share in terms of, and again, probably those key relationships who really move the city. And it doesn't matter if it's the Downtown Business Improvement District, it doesn't matter if it's the folks who actually build our city, and who in the government has been especially helpful. We're happy to pass all of those contacts along to make sure he can just pick up, and that the city of Regina doesn't, move backwards at all.
I think right now, obviously it's still fresh, but maybe what's next?
That's a great question. I get my life back. I'm gonna go drink a beer and enjoy it immensely. In all honesty, I have 4 adult children. I have 2 grandchildren. You saw a couple of them you saw them running around here tonight. Really kind of looking at what's available out there. I know there's lots, and so getting just a bit more of my post-work time after 5 o'clock for most people. It's been 6 days a week, a lot for the ever since the pandemic ended. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I have been invited to Mexico, to Phoenix, to Palm Springs, and to New Orleans so far tonight.
Amazing. Anything else you want to add or get out there?
No, just.
Highlight of the last 4 years?
What's that?
A highlight of the last 4 years?
Oh gosh, I can't pick just one. I think I will say the relationships that you get to develop and that you get to make connections with on behalf of the city are incredible. And again, we have so many businesses and organizations and individuals in this city who are trying to make the city a better place. They're trying to become the city that it can be. Sometimes you need to get out of their way, and sometimes you need to advocate for them when they need help. I just think all of the people that I've been able to meet, and sometimes they're just, citizens who may call in with a complaint that you're able to help, but oftentimes they're folks that are doing really big things that literally change the face of our city. It's just been an absolute honor and a privilege.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can all pack it in now.
Enjoy your beer.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
You have been listening in to Sandra Masters, defeated as Regina mayor. She goes down to defeat to Chad Baczynski, who is taking over as mayor, has not served any previous roles on council. Lori Bresciani, the outgoing Ward 4 city councillor, coming in second this evening, falling short of Chad Baczynski. We also do have some results this evening from City Council. These are the final results, and we can tell you who has won what. In Ward 1, Dan Rasevich, the former Saskatchewan Rough Rider, has won over his 2 challengers there. In Ward 2, Bob Hawkins, incumbent since 2012, goes down to defeat to George Siklis. In Ward 3 this evening, it is David Froh who has a commanding lead over his other 2 challengers in Ward 3. In Ward 4, this was originally it was Glenn Geiger who was winning this, but it flipped at the last minute. Mark Burton has taken over that seat. Mark Burton, who works in information technology, he previously chaired the city's Parks and Recreation Board. Ward 5 goes to Sarah Turnbull. Sarah Turnbull, a interior designer and advocate for accessibility and disability inclusive spaces. In Ward 6, fairly commanding victory for Victoria Flores. Flores is a communications and marketing coordinator with the Regina Open Door Society. And in Ward 7, we have another incumbent who has gone down to defeat, Tarina Nelson, falling to Shabna Radins. Again, this is a rematch of 2020 between Radins and Nelson. Radins is a is currently the president of the Regina and District Labour Council. And in Ward 8, well, this is one incumbent who has managed to keep their ward and their city council seat in Regina. It is Shannon Zakidniak, who will return for a second term, first elected in 2020. A pretty comfortable lead over her contender there. This was a tight one, but Jason Mancinelli has managed to hang on to Ward 9. He will continue to serve for another 4 years. Again, Mancinelli first elected in 2016. He took over that ward from Terry Hinks, I believe that was, who passed away during the 2016 mayoral and councillor campaign. And in Ward 10, it is Clark Bizo who takes over the seat left vacant by Landon Mole, who left that seat. Jerry Flegel, former city councillor, former mayoral candidate, was also running in Ward 10, but it'll be Clark Bizo who takes that spot. Andrew, we were talking earlier a little bit about Advance Regina and Common Sense Regina. I see a couple of the names on that results board there that are candidates that those organizations say they are endorsing. Your thoughts tonight on maybe a couple of those candidates making it into council?
You know, I congratulate anybody who's made it onto council. They were able to summon confidence of the communities. It might be worth noting that you see the return of some exceptional incumbents. I just want to congratulate Shannon and Jason. I consider them friends. And I don't think people know enough about the labor of love that they invest in the city and their job and tending to the day-to-day issues of residents. So I think there might have been some contention there, but I think they're going to serve their communities really well. Sarah Turnbull and Victoria Flores, what an exceptional addition to City Council. So what I'm seeing is actually some folks who fly in the face of those very far-right agendas are joining council at the same time as some folks who are endorsed by Advance Regina and others. So it's going to be a really wild dynamic, in my opinion. Really interesting change in the racialized and gender dynamic. So this looks like a fun council to watch. And you're going to have some folks with experience, some brand new folks who have their own experience in the community. So yeah, this will be interesting. I'm really excited to see this unfold. Of course, I'm telling my wife I'm not going to pay attention to council politics anymore, but I'm lying. And she's not watching this, so I'll never be held accountable for it.
That's right.
But yeah, this is interesting. Yeah.
John, we have only 2 incumbents returning to Regina City Council. What role do councillors like Shannon Zakidniak and Jason Mancinelli have now that they are the only 2 familiar faces, and especially in, getting this new mayor and council up to speed?
I think right now they're afraid of what's coming, and unfortunately, this has been the biggest, like 9 new faces coming into City Hall. Before was like maybe 5 or 4 or 6, 9. I don't believe this has ever been like this. I believe this is historic number. Numbers have changed. So they're smart. I mean, they're well schooled on the sense of being council and representing the community. But I see they'll have a big job because you have 9 new folks coming in to orient them around the City Hall, orient them about even the oval of the council, all of those things. So they'll have their hands full. I mean, I'm confident it's not going to take long for the new members that are coming in. They wanted to be there. They put the name up on the ballot to take the chance for the citizens to look at them and elect them. They don't elect themselves. We don't elect them. The citizens of Regina elected them to represent them, to bring their thoughts, their feelings, their passion about Regina, to speak on their behalf. And the biggest thing is to communicate, to be that middle person between the residents and the City Hall. That's the job. There's only certain things, and the City Act warrants that, tells you what you need to do and what you don't need to do. And that's what they need to learn. Read those bylaws, read those city acts, making sure that they understand where they fit. But it's going to be a challenge. So I know they're going to succeed. No worries. They're going to need help. Anytime anyone wants to come and ask a question, like Andrew says, I'm going to pay attention to this thing too. I think we need to, as citizens, to give a hand, like ongoing. Our Mayor Master said, you need to congratulate the new folks that coming in here, wish them all the best and luck, and support them in their venture, because the next 4 years or the next first 6 months is going to be incredibly. They have no climbing gear, and they're on ice.
Okay. And of course, you'll be open to giving advice right after you jump on a plane with Masters to wherever she's been invited to.
I didn't even know we were all invited to this resort.
That's right. I think it's an outgoing councillor party, perhaps, going there. We have Chad Baczynski, Mayor-elect of Regina, arriving at City Hall, and he will be speaking with reporters. Let's listen in to see what he has to say.
We're on the mic side? Yeah. Sure.
So, John. So, Chad, do you want to go speech first?
Yeah, I was just gonna say a few words first, if that's okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
Everybody good in terms of cameras? All right. Cool. Chad.
Good to go. Awesome. Thank you, Regina. Tonight is a celebration of our collective commitment to our city, our families, and our future. I'm honored and deeply humbled to accept the responsibility of serving as your next mayor. This is a role I do not take lightly, and I want to express my deep appreciation to everyone who believed in our vision and our message. I also want to thank my incredible family, my wife Shallon, who's over there somewhere, who doesn't want to be on camera, and my children Graydon and Cecily, who are home hopefully sleeping right now. Your support and understanding have made it possible for me to pursue this dream of making Regina a safer, more affordable place for everybody. To my outstanding campaign team, I am forever grateful for your hard work, dedication, and belief in this campaign. A special thank you to my campaign manager, Thomas, whose leadership and, more importantly, friendship has been invaluable every step of the way. To Dana, Shauna, Dylan, Christine, Morgan, Rachel, Jill, everybody, thank you for your energy, ideas, and the countless hours that you've invested in this vision. And to everyone else who contributed in ways big and small, from knocking on doors to spreading the word, I couldn't have done this without you. To the other candidates who ran alongside me, thank you for your commitment to our city. Our different perspectives have strengthened the democratic process. Our campaign has been built around a vision of Regina where safety and affordability are the foundation for our growth and success. We set out to make Regina a place where everyone feels safe in their homes, on their streets, and in their neighborhoods. We committed to investing in core infrastructure so that our roads, water systems, and public services are reliable and modern. And we pledged to look out for our most vulnerable, because a city is only as strong as the compassion that it shows for those in need. Tonight we begin the next phase of our journey together. Our work starts with listening and ensuring that every voice in Regina has a place in shaping our future. My commitment is to be accessible, transparent, and accountable so that every resident knows their concerns are heard and acted upon. There will be challenges ahead, but together I am confident we will overcome them. Together we will build a safer, more affordable, and vibrant Regina, a city that every one of us is proud to call home. Thank you, Regina. Thank you for your trust and support in our shared future, and now let's get to work.
So, Chad Baczynski, Mayor-elect of Regina, what does it mean to you to hear those words?
You know, humbling, really humbling. Incredible to see the support, and just really excited to you know, enact and take action on the things that we've talked about for the last number of weeks.
What do you feel won this election for you?
I think a couple things. One, people obviously want some change, you know, a change in what's been happening. Two, I think, you know, there was a lot of talk about, you know, backing and support and who's supporting who, and I confidently can say that we ran a true grassroots word-of-mouth campaign through and through, and I think that really resonated with people, and that's what people took to heart.
Your name jumped to the top as soon as the numbers came in, and you stayed at the top through the whole thing. What was it like? What was going through your head as you saw that happen?
A lot of noise where we were. There was a lot of excitement. I have the best hype man over here in the corner that was keeping everybody pretty excited. So I was trying to stay pretty grounded to make sure that we waited until things came in. But yeah, it was exciting to see. But at the end of the day, it was making sure that we waited until everything came in.
At what point in the campaign did you think, holy cow, I've got a real shot of winning this?
You know, probably in the last 2 weeks, I would say, is when we really felt the momentum start to pick up. Just in talking to residents and getting, I think, the messages and the stories, people saying like, hey, you know, I really believe in this. And yeah, I think in the last couple of weeks, it really felt like the momentum shifted in our favor.
You have background as a project manager of some very large projects. How do you feel that will serve you as mayor?
I think for me, it's really the ability to understand and connect with administration and see when they're bringing projects forward, understanding the challenges, understanding, you know, everything down to terminology. I think that just hopefully makes things move quicker and we can take action a little faster.
What's your day one priority when you sit down in this office with President?
Honestly, listen, learn, look, listen, and learn. That's the biggest thing. I know there's a lot to learn. I know there'll be a massive learning curve and a lot to download. But yeah, I'm up for it. I'm excited.
Chad, when you get into office, it looks like you're going to have almost 3/4 of a council brand new. What does that look like for you, kind of building those relationships with new councillors?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to build teams, you know, bring in new people, work with new people, understand different personalities. I'm excited. I think it's great. I think that it's an opportunity for everybody. And I know, again, Regina has said they want change. This is a great opportunity to set a new tone for Regina.
What is that tone going to be?
Collaboration, listening, respectful discourse, things that I've heard loud and clear that Regina expects.
What was the call like from Sandra Masters? She called you a little bit earlier. What was that call like?
Wow, you guys are good. Yeah, it was great. It was very, really respectful. Just congratulations and reaching out to offer support in transition and that. So I really appreciated that.
You just kind of spoke to it, but at least 9 new, or at least right now, based on the unofficial results, 9 new councillors. That's a lot of change in this room the next time that we're in this room. I guess for you, what does that, I guess, speak to what residents want from the next Regina City Council?
Again, Regina has spoken loud and clear. They want change. They wanted to see a different outlook, a different approach. So that's what I'm excited for. I'm excited that we're going to have some different perspectives, and that's a good thing. We're going to bring it together, and yeah, it'll be new. It'll be very new, but I think it'll be a good thing.
For those voters who may not have been able to take in your entire platform, can you say where you're going to bring that change?
That's a big question. You know, again, my pillars were safety and affordability. I think some of that, especially on the affordability piece, a lot of people have talked about it. Some of the change is, I believe, being realistic. I've said, you know, I don't believe we can freeze property taxes. We need to be realistic. We need to balance the projects, balance the infrastructure, make sure that we're investing in the right things at the right time. So that is what I want to bring forward.
So over the coming weeks, what are your immediate priorities going to be? I guess just getting up to speed would be one of them.
Yeah, getting up to speed. Yeah, meeting with council, understanding, you know, getting to know everybody, really. There's a massive amount of people and process to understand and learn. And yeah, I'm excited to get started and get at it.
How old are you? I have to ask the question.
38.
Okay,
Yeah.
Obviously a younger kind of vision for council with you. How are you feeling as a 38-year-old now being the top politician in the city?
Great. I've got energy. You can ask my wife. I don't sleep a lot. We got 2 young kids. We're running all the time. So I'm excited. I'm excited to put that energy to use for the city.
Did you ever think you could ever go into politics? Was that ever something you thought of in general? Or?
For sure, yeah. It's something I've thought of, and I have an amazing support system behind me that really, you know, kind of gave me that extra push to say, you know what, the time is now. Let's try it. Let's go for it, and here we are.
Ready to go to questions, or?
Where are you headed, tonight immediately after we're done here? Are you going back to where you were before, or going home?
Probably home. Yeah, I think my daughter's asleep, but I think my older son might be eagerly waiting to see his dad. So we'll probably head home to go see them.
Pretty good. Cool. Chad, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Are you free? We're live.
You have been listening to Chad Bashinsky, Mayor-elect of Regina, speaking at Regina City Hall this evening. Bashinsky is expressing his deep appreciation to his supporters and his campaign trail, saying he's been humbled by the support he's received. He says he believes he won this election on change being needed at City Hall, and has run a grassroots campaign, not funded through any third parties or anything like that. That, of course, has been a topic in this campaign. He said his campaign was run on safety and affordability as his two top pillars, and he believes being realistic about the city's goals was part of that helped him get reelected. Day one, he says, look, listen, and learn will be the 3 L's that he's going to be learning by, and he will have an opportunity to do that because defeated Mayor Sandra Masters has given him her personal cell number. She mentioned that in her scrum, and they have already called and talked. By the way, Bashinsky, 38 years old, just doing some quick Googling. Pat Fiacco, born in 1962, but we don't have a date of birth, so it's possible that those two were the exact same age. Maybe Bashinsky is a little bit younger than that, but perhaps the youngest mayor Regina has seen. That'll be, I'm sure, something people will be looking at in the coming days, the stat people out there. We have the results in Regina, but we are now going to go up to Saskatoon, because that is a race that we've been looking at as well for mayor. And that is where we find Stephanie Massicotte. And Stephanie, I'm hoping for your sake that we have some results coming in, more results.
I was going to say, Ethan, we're a little jealous of you up here in Saskatoon that your results are in, but I do believe that we have some new numbers here in Saskatoon. So we'll take a look at those again. The top 3 candidates, Cynthia Block sitting at over 19,000 votes. She is currently in the lead. Gord Wyant behind her at a little over 13,000 votes. So over 6,000 vote difference between Cynthia Block there and Gordon Wyant. Don Atchison trailing behind there with just over 6,800 votes. Again, that's 52 of 82 polls reporting, but over 50% of the polls there. Marin, I know I keep asking you this question. It's probably similar. The numbers are kind of following this trend. Mm-hmm. Do you think we're going to see it follow all the way to the end?
At this point, if I'm Cynthia Block's campaign, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable and confident with these numbers. The ratios are not changing, which means that that initial lead is being borne out in the neighborhood polls. So those individual ward polls that are now coming in are showing the same kinds of voting patterns. A little bit of shifting here and there, but generally speaking, what it would take now for Gord Wyant to overtake Cynthia Block would be for almost all of the remaining polls to be substantially in his favor. And I think that's quite unlikely because, you win some here and you win some there, but you're not going to win, the next 40 polls. So I think what we will likely see is that Cynthia Block will be victorious. That could change. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but we'd have to see a real change in the voting trend from here on out. And I think we would also, we'd need to see the support for the other candidates kind of collapse and coalesce around Gord Wyant in order for him to be able to catch her.
We're seeing, we saw Regina's results roll in, and I believe they said 9 out of 10 councillors will be new. Mm-hmm. So that trend of, anti-incumbent sentiments, or sentiments, I should say, there are a couple incumbents here in Saskatoon, 3 to be exact. Should they be worried, or do you think because Cynthia could possibly be seen as an incumbent and the possibility of her being elected as mayor, the trend be different here?
I think we're not likely to see that same sort of widespread change. I think, as we discussed earlier, I think there is one incumbent seat to watch, and that's in Ward 1. That was a very close race in 2020, and I think it will be a very close race tonight. I think the other incumbents, you know, 2 of which were acclaimed, obviously have no concerns tonight. Wards 4 and 5, Councillors Davies and Donauer, I expect both of those to win handily. Both of them are quite popular in their wards, and they have not been met with real serious contenders. Another thing that we've talked about already tonight is when you've got multiple candidates running against you as an incumbent, then they have to fight over that anti-incumbent share of the vote. And particularly in Ward 5, there are a lot of candidates trying to get those votes, and I think it would be nearly impossible for either Councillor Davies or Councillor Donauer to be defeated. I think we'll have to keep a close eye on Ward 1 tonight to see what happens there, because in some ways it's a bit of a rematch of 2020, but there are other candidates in the fray as well, and so how those votes get divvied up is really going to be it's going to be critical in determining who's successful there, because, you know, I expect some of those candidates will be pulling votes from the incumbent, from Councillor Hill, and then they'll be competing with each other based on some of their messaging, their priorities, and their ideology.
Thank you so much for that, Marin. Slowly but surely, the numbers are coming in. Stick with us because we will be having final results coming up, hopefully, in the next little bit. But for now, I'll throw things back over to Ethan Williams in Regina.
Yeah, and it's not only Regina and Saskatoon, of course, Stephanie, that we're keeping an eye on for those results tonight, but there are over 500 results or elections happening in cities, towns, and RMs across the province. And here is a look at some of the smaller cities in southern Saskatchewan where we are seeing results coming in. These are the mayor races, by the way. This is in Moose Jaw, and it is James Murdoch, who has defeated incumbent Mayor Clive Tolley. Tolley had been mayor since 2021. That was a mayoral by-election that happened in Moose Jaw. Again, James Murdoch, he is the owner of Moose Jaw Funeral Home and has lived in Moose Jaw for over 30 years. He's also a current board member of the Moose Jaw Health Foundation and Providence Place Health Foundation, and that is the result tonight in Moose Jaw. We'll move on now to Estevan. This city's mayoral seat was left vacant. Long-serving Mayor Roy Ludwig retired after serving 3 terms as mayor since 2012. He had been on council since 1994. And at this point, we should note here that in Estevan, they cannot confirm the results until the morning because they don't have anyone dedicated to monitor it. But we know that Anthony Cernick is up by just over 1,250 votes in Estevan. So again, no incumbent in Estevan, but that is the result there. Another situation, though, where we have seen an incumbent go down is in Weyburn. Incumbent Mayor Marcel Roy goes down to defeat to Jeff Richards. Richards was a city councillor. He had served on city council since 2020, and he is the former executive director of the Weyburn Chamber of Commerce, and he is a current director with SaskPower. So again, Marcel Roy, who had served as mayor since 2016 in Weyburn, going down to defeat. So, and I should also note as well, Swift Current, the mayor there was acclaimed. There was no one running against the mayor there in Swift Current. So that race had already been decided. We are here back focusing on Regina with our panel in Regina, 2 outgoing city councillors, Andrew Stevens and John Findura. Andrew, we have just seen Chad Bashinsky, mayor-elect of Regina, make his speech at City Hall. It is official. He is mayor of Regina now. A relatively a political newcomer, relatively unknown before this. How important is it going to be for Chad to, kind of get that name recognition and familiarity out there with council and with people as he starts his new job?
Well, I think it's just as simple as actually getting out into the community. What that means for him now is going to be very different. So you're going to have to meet with folks that are part of various different business organizations, development corporations, municipal corporations that are arm's length. I think maybe where the public has some interest that might be change-oriented is really informal community town halls that have no agenda but are just meant to get folks to come out, to talk, to engage. So there's that kind of learning. He said something there that is really worth noting, and that is you're going to be learning and listening a lot, and you're going to be more of a student than you are a teacher. And that served me well because 8 years, every meeting there would be something new that I would learn, and I loved it. Some reports I could probably write in my sleep because we'd seen them so many times, but if he sticks by that mantra, you're constantly trying to engage and think about things in different ways, and that means you're learning from residents, from organizations, from other counselors, as well as the piles and piles of documents that you're going to get. That will serve him well. The other point is the realistic part, and notice what he said there, and I think we should all take note, is that he's going to listen to, and all the other counselors, to residents who are going to be furious on Facebook and just want their taxes reduced. I think he's shown that nobody really ran on that, and he wants to invest in the city and see it prosper, and that takes resources. So I'm hopeful that the rest of council is going to have to take that to heart. So, if everybody wants to learn and be a student in this process, I think it's going to be a really interesting 4 years for them.
John, one of the questions that was asked of candidates in the all-mayoral candidate debate last month was, what are you going to do in your first 100 days? And so if given the opportunity, if you were mayor, what do you think needs to get done? And what do you think Chad needs to do in these first 100 days, given what we've seen in this last council term?
Just listening to him, he sounds very positive. So he's going to he has to realign his focus. First 100 days, they have to prepare for budget. That'll be the number one thing to think about, because nothing stops. City still grows, still all the investments are there. And the administration is going to throw this big book at them, and they're going to figure out numbers. So the first, it takes a little bit less than 100 years. I believe in a couple months they'll be debating the budget. I think council kind of put only 1 year on the table to kind of ease the process. But I would say that would be the first thing to figure out, line up what Chad did say about lining out the priorities of what should go and where and how. So we're going to be watching that to see how the rest of the council, and he has a right idea, but see what the rest of the council wants to do. But first 100 days, it's going to go like that, and 100 days going to come by, and you're going to feel like you didn't accomplish anything. But you actually did. You're actually doing things. And so it'll be interesting that it's going to have to be some of a calmness about things. So you look at the new, let's just say all the newbies that are there, right? There's going to be a learning curve for the council itself. Mayor's got a huge learning curve. Council's got just as big, and so how they match. I don't think we've ever had, when we came first time. When I came in the first time, the first 100 days, this was blur, right? Before we didn't have tablets, we had books. So the book was like 1,000 pages, and you get lost in it. So just concentrate on not necessarily, because I don't think, like you said, tax raising wasn't involved. You cannot raise taxes. You need to operate. You need to pay people to do the jobs. But you have to kind of look at the project. And I think some of the stuff that's been happening this election with the incumbents and all that was about some of the large projects that are going, is it not. So in 100 days, I think I'll be my crystal ball is going to tell me what to expect out of the council, how they're going to progress going for the 4 years. So the first 100 days is going to tell the story, how well they're going to react, move the city forward, do all the things that the city is going to do, and what's going to be slid off the plate, what's going to be added to the plate, that's going to be the big picture. And again, like the new mayor coming, new mayor-elect, Brzezinski is going to figure out how he's going to deal. But he has a one vote, and it has to be like, if they talked about, like we just did talked about things, we did get along at the council. We voted 70 to 80% at the same thing. So we need to look at the positives, not the negative. And how so even for the past council, look at the positives that was done there. Do not look at the negatives. The negatives outweighed, the small little package outweighed the positive. And we need to figure out when this new council starts, close the door, new chapter. You have some things that we as a council put on the books and put on their agenda, right? So the first 100 days, they're going to figure out what is on that agenda. The previous council, what did they left us with? There's a lot of issues coming, some things that we've tabled. They got to deal with it, right? So it's, you know, I mean, I wish them luck. I wish them all the best. Any help that they're looking for, I'm available. I'm here. I'm not going to spend. I mean, Andrew was just saying we might show up at the first council meeting or something like that, right? But no. But you know what I mean. So it's exciting to win a post like this. The people give you that mandate or give you their vote, their trust, and their belief that you can do something with that. So power in one is 0. Power in 11, in me make something.
And they'll all be learning it together, at least, as they kind of go on that journey, for sure. Okay, well, Regina, we know the outcome, and of course we heard from some of the smaller cities there, but of course a race is still being run in Saskatoon. Still, yes, at this late hour of the night, and that is where we find Stephanie Massicotte, who's holding down the fort in our Saskatoon newsroom.
Who would have thought we'd be here 3 hours later, Ethan? But here we are. You reported some of the smaller cities, the results that have rolled in for some more smaller cities. So we'll show you right now. In Prince Albert, this is huge. This is pretty big. Greg Dion was the incumbent in Prince Albert, mayor for 12 years. He has been defeated by Bill Polinsky. Bill serves as president of the Prince Albert and Area Community Foundation. He brings extensive governmental experience. He actually has 24 years with the federal government. So a big upset there in Prince Albert for former Mayor Greg Dion. Mayor-elect is Bill Polinsky there. Let's go over now to North Battleford, where there was no incumbent. David Gillen, the City of North Battleford's mayor, confirmed he would not be seeking re-election, and Kelly Houghton has won. She has served as an elected councillor since 2014. Her experience and leadership, she aims to unite people for future growth. So yes, that is a big win there. Kelly Houghton, again, mayor-elect in North Battleford. And finally, in Yorkton, another upset. Incumbent Mitch Hipsley was running. He was elected as mayor back in 2020 and served as a councillor in the previous term. Challenging Hipsley was business owner Aaron Keenley. He served as councillor from 2016 to 2020. He lost by 86 votes when running for mayor the following term. And you see there, Yorkton with a new mayor as well, Mayor-elect Aaron Keenley. Now, Marin, we're seeing a lot of incumbents being ousted. I'm going to talk to you in just a bit about that, but first let's go to some Saskatoon results. We have some new numbers. Cynthia Block still in the lead with just over 23,000. Gord Wyant distancing himself a little bit there at just over 15,000, and then Don Atchison with just over 8,000. Now that is 62 of 82 polls reporting. I do want to quickly talk, though, Cynthia, before we get into those numbers, just because we had mentioned those small cities. You're also seeing new mayor in Moose Jaw, Regina, Weyburn. Is this a turning point for Saskatchewan for a lot of these cities?
Well, I do think it's interesting to see this much turnover. I mean, it is not. It's not perhaps all of that surprising considering the broader trends that we've talked about several times tonight about that change motivation from voters. And I do have to wonder, I think in some cases, and this was certainly true in Saskatoon, I think there was perhaps some extended continuity during the pandemic. You know, in Saskatoon, we had almost no turnover in 2020. I think a lot of people wanted to sort of not make sweeping changes during such a contentious and unpredictable time. And so it's possible that we're seeing some delayed turnover in some of these elections, but I think if that is true, it's definitely compounding the other variables we've talked about tonight, you know, wanting to see a change in office. So it seems as though, you know, at least in the mayoral race in Saskatoon, that sentiment is not gaining as much traction. But it's interesting to have this much change. It's as our counterparts in Regina have discussed, the learning curve is huge, and sort of finding your way in that new landscape is a daunting task, but it's also very necessary to have turnover in these kinds of institutions. You do not want consistency forever. You want fresh perspectives, and so I think it's an exciting time for a lot of these communities, and wishing all of those new mayors across the province all the best.
Now, it is hard to believe, but councillors and mayors, it is just a part-time job. A lot of people still hold full-time jobs. What do you think is going to happen when these new councillors and new mayors take over? Do you think it's going to be an uphill climb?
I think it really depends on the expectations and the flexibility that these candidates are bringing into these positions. I think Saskatoon and Regina are both in a bit of an awkward phase in their trajectory as they grow, a bit of a teenaged era perhaps, because those mid-sized cities often have a difficult time making the transition from a part-time council to a full-time council. In cities like Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, you'll see councils that have constituency offices, they have staff supporting each individual councillor, and it's not necessarily better or worse, it's just different because the number of constituents that you have necessitates it. In Saskatoon, although the role is designated as a part-time role, most of the existing council treat it as a full-time position and perhaps have other part-time work on the side. Almost no one has a full-time position in addition to council. And so I think if people are coming into this role, especially in those two cities, and expecting to be able to do the work off the side of the desk, they may be disappointed by what they find in terms of the workload. It's a very dynamic role. Things change quickly. And so I think in the next 4 years, these councils in the larger cities in Saskatchewan are going to have some tough conversations about how to structure the work to be successful, to provide the representation and accountability that residents deserve and want. And it's always a politically sensitive discussion because the perception is that moving from a full-time to from a part-time to a full-time role is somehow a reward for council. So it's a difficult thing to tackle. It's often very messy when cities try to make that transition. I think that those two cities are going to need to have those conversations in this term.
We talked about big projects a little bit earlier. Our council is a little unique compared to Regina's. We're not going to see quite as many new councillors. So there will be some people who, voted on some of these bigger projects in the past, still have to vote moving forward. Yourself as an outgoing councillor, how do you feel about that? Like, it's a lot of work. Like you said, it's a part-time job, but you did a lot of work while you sat on council. Are you going to be upset if some of that work is undone, or how are you going to feel?
I like to think that I'll be, exercising a healthy amount of detachment from the day-to-day discussions and debates at council. But of course, I ran for this role because I feel very invested and passionate about the community, and I don't think that passion will fade. And so you also, I think, as a councillor, you never get done all of the things you wanted to get to or to complete. That having been said, I'm really proud of a lot of the progress that we've made in the time that I was on council. I think the major projects that are sort of going to be of interest to the public are, as I mentioned earlier, for people who are opposed to things like the downtown and event and entertainment district and are coming in and expecting that they might be able to sort of turn that ship around quickly. It's not going to be easy to do that. You have to find alternatives if you want to cancel council's current course of action. And as has already been discussed tonight, lots of people in the community will advocate for a back to basics approach, return to basics. And the challenge that I've always thought we have is that no one agrees what those basics are. For some people, the basics are roads and sidewalks, and for other people, the basics are swimming lessons in parks. And for some people, the basics are transit and active transportation. So finding consensus is one of the most challenging elements of local government. You have to do things at least with 6 votes. You can do almost nothing as an individual councillor. And so finding those points of unity with your colleagues and being able to advance things that at least 6 of you agree on is a real challenge, and it's slow going. So I think there are lots of projects and initiatives that I care about very much. I also think that it would be very hard to have undone all of the things that this council has progressed in terms of taking better care of our infrastructure, planning in a more thoughtful and sustainable way, environmental protections and so forth.
What is something you wish you would have been able to move forward in your time on council?
I was reflecting a lot on the reasons that I ran for council. And when I ran for council, my motivations were, I was a young person who had just moved back to Saskatoon. I was a renter. I was using transit to get to work, biking a lot. I thought, we need to have a better transit system. We need better active transportation systems. The city needs to be more, we need to grow inward and outward. And it's noteworthy to me that these are all still things we're talking about. And so in some ways I feel like it would have been great to have been able to make more progress on those variables. But so when I would like to have seen our BRT plans, we were sort of stymied by some timing around the pandemic, but it would be nice to see those further along in its progress. It'd be nice to see a little bit more progress on our active transportation plan, but you have to respond to what comes up. And certainly no one predicted the pandemic. When I was first elected, the amount of time and focus that we spent talking about affordable housing was negligible. Now that is the top issue at City Hall in the last year has been housing and homelessness. So you just, you come in with one set of ideas about what you want to achieve, but you have to be nimble because the circumstances in the community change. And so I feel quite proud of what we've achieved, but I also know so much more now than I did at the beginning. And I think, it's an exercise in staying flexible and trying to respond to what the community is asking for.
The last election was in, the height of the pandemic, and then the trickle effect in the next few years following. What is the post-COVID political landscape like?
Well, one of the things that I think is not widely understood is the ongoing effects to the fiscal picture of the city that post-pandemic landscape has had, not just on Saskatoon, but cities across the country. In many ways, our revenues have never fully rebounded from pandemic times. People's behaviors changed in ways that didn't reset completely. So things like leisure center revenues and transit revenues and even parking revenues are very slow to climb back up. At the same time, the city had built in risk to its budget to try to go easy on taxpayers because it was such a difficult time. And then we saw supply chain issues, inflation that was just tremendous, and far outpaced actual household inflation. And so we have struggled to restore the robust nature of our pre-pandemic revenues.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Marin, but we are just seeing Cynthia Block walking up to City Hall. That is happening live right now. Of course, she had quite a bit of a lead. Big round of applause as she enters. Big smile on her face as well. So yeah, she's obviously left her viewing party and headed down to City Hall. What do you think this means?
I think this means she feels confident in her success as mayor-elect. And I think looks like they're getting their ducks in a row there for a statement.
Yeah, she's all set up, so we're just waiting for her to get up to the mics. There we go.
That we hope to get to shortly, but come on, kids. Rebecca. These are like super important people to me. Obviously, my two children, and of course the amazing woman Rebecca Cormack, our campaign manager. We got Bronson here, who's been on the trail all the way along. Poli-sci grad, who's been with us. Very grateful. So here I am. I guess I'm the mayor-elect, and I could not be more proud and grateful for a city that has chosen hope, a city that has chosen a vision that means we have an opportunity to thrive for all of us. I think for all of the reasons that people think this election might matter more for various reasons, I think the single biggest one is that the vision was connected with the residents. This isn't my victory, this is Saskatoon's victory. Saskatoon has chosen a city
for all people. They want a modern 21st century city that's moving forward, not backward. A city that is increasingly representative of places around the world. And how are we going to make sure that all of them can thrive here? We need to strengthen our treaty relationships. These are sort of the foundational principles of a great city moving forward. And that's what I intend to do. We need to continue to move forward. I want to say for all of the things and the challenges that our city has, we also have an enormous amount of potential. We are literally like a living landscape of bounty, and we need to remember that. We need to work together and embrace it and make sure that we are creating a city for all people, not just for today, but in the long run. So I think that as we move forward as a city, we need to embrace, I guess, the challenges, as I've said, but I really want to make sure that we are bringing people in. So on the one side, I'll say that I'm so grateful, obviously, for so many people who have stepped up and supported this campaign. I literally can't say enough about the extraordinary hours that have been put in to bring us to this day. And I will have to say a shout out to a pretty strong group of women that helped to lead many aspects of this campaign. And I'm really proud of that. I think they showed up in ways that I just could never even have imagined. And I think that's made a really big difference in this election. But as I want to thank every single resident who voted for me tonight, I also want to say thank you to those who didn't, because you're going to make me better. I want us to work everyone together. Let's figure out the challenges we face, and let's move forward together as one city. Thank you.
Have you spoken to any of your opponents about Wyant or done that?
I haven't.
What is the feeling knowing that you are the first woman mayor of Saskatoon?
I am honored. I think representation matters. I want every woman and girl to know that they can lead. And that means in all leadership roles and in all houses of leadership. But ultimately, I think that what connected most with residents in this campaign had to do with the vision of our city.
It's looking like half the council is going to be brand new. What are you going to be doing as mayor-elect to really kind of get them, up to speed, working with the councils that already are on council?
I don't even know for sure who has all been in the winning side in the wards. I was trying to pay attention throughout the evening, but as we all know, it took a while. And as the mayoral results were coming in, so were the ward ones. So I didn't really get a chance to see all of them, and I'm very much looking forward to see who the new council will be and having an opportunity to get to know them. And just the way that the councils work, what will happen is there'll be a big orientation, probably a couple of days of it, and in order to make sure that we are all teaching and learning together to figure out how we're going to be able to run the city together. While each individual member of council, we're individuals. We don't belong to political parties. So it's an interesting discussion, and sometimes you're going to disagree, and that's okay. But I think that when we can move forward with respect, and I think that that has been, a hallmark of our council in Saskatoon, and it's something I'm very proud of, that we figure out ways to disagree respectfully, as we also try really hard to make good decisions for our city.
There was a fair amount of shenanigans in this election. These third-party groups spending money and putting up billboards and being on social media and all sorts of stuff like that. How do you find the election? What do you think your election says? Because I think a lot of it was directed at you and criticizing the incumbent council and decisions that have been made and all sorts of other things. How do you view your victory in terms of that?
I'm always disappointed when we know more that what we're against than what we're for. And I think that was a big part of our campaign, about talking about, just very honestly and straightforward about the challenges that we face, and knowing that we need a fresh approach on a lot of things, but also understanding that municipalities are on the front lines of so many of the challenges that cities face, but we do not have the tools to solve them alone. And I think when folks understand that, we have a better chance to work together. That's why so much of my plan calls for bringing residents and businesses to the table, so that we are making sure that the decisions we are making are more public facing in a way that people feel more included, so that we have ownership about the ways that we're going to problem solve together.
You're not an incumbent as mayor, but you are an incumbent councillor. It's been a difficult time for incumbents to get elected worldwide because of inflation and those sorts of things. How do you think you overcame that, or did you feel you had to overcome it?
Well, I think it was very helpful to have an amazing team. I just can't even begin to say how proud I am of absolutely the individual efforts of so many people and how we collectively came together to get a victory tonight. But it's also the way that we approached the campaign. We had a mandate for each other about how we were going to treat each other as part of the campaign, how we were going to treat the people that would come into the campaign office, or how we were going to manage things if things, were sometimes not so kind. And I think that keeping that level of integrity and keeping ourselves to account and trying to always remember that when you started to feel like maybe you're on your heels a little bit because of some of the folks that were saying things maybe we didn't like, we just remembered our game plan. And we looked forward, and we just kept connecting on the doors and meeting people in Saskatoon as often and as much as we could. And I think ultimately that's what people want. They want they want leadership in their city that's being honest with them, that are genuinely trying to move things forward, to solve problems with them, and also with an eye to the future, so that there's hope, and there's so much hope here. We have so much to be grateful for, and I think that's a message people want to hear.
Well, there you have it. History in the making, Saskatoon, with Mayor-elect Cynthia Block. She is the first woman to be mayor in our city of Saskatoon. You heard from her. She believes this is a city full of hope. And it's not just a win for her. She says it is a win for the entire city of Saskatoon. So, of course, we will have more with Mayor-elect Cynthia Block tomorrow morning on Saskatoon Morning. But you can see right there, 72 of 82 polls reporting, and Cynthia leading by just over 7,800 votes. So quite a bit of a lead there, and we are still waiting for a lot of those ward races to come in for councillors. There are just a few of them that are too close to call, so you will have to check out our website for the latest results on that, cbc.ca/Saskatoon. You can also follow live election results on electionresults.saskatoon.ca. But there is one thing, if people have been watching the ward results, looks like Ward 1, Darren Hill, will be unseated.
It does look that way, and we knew that would be a really close race this evening. I think it looks as though Councillor Hill is going to be defeated. What's not clear is who will have defeated him, because the two other candidates who have sort of been trading leads all night, it's very, very close. And without knowing how many polls are yet to come in, I don't think we can say for certain who the victor is going to be there. But yeah, so there will be even more change on this council than we knew there would be. And so, for Mayor-elect Block coming in, that'll be an early dynamic to work through.
Marion, I know you didn't expect to be here quite this long, but we do want to thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
We're going to throw things back over to Ethan Williams in Regina.
A virtual high five. Oops, this hand. High five to you, Stephanie Massicotte in Saskatoon. Yeah, other ways. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And we are, of course, going to run through the results here in Regina as well. Of course, Regina has a new mayor, Chad Bashinsky. All polls reporting 16,508 votes. He unseats Sandra Masters this evening. She is in third place, in fact. Lori Bresciani, outgoing Ward 4 councillor, sitting in the middle between those two. Bill Pratt picking up about 6,300 of the votes. But of course, those are not the only four candidates who were running for mayor in Regina. There are many more. There are, of course, many of these candidates not receiving nearly as many votes. Melina Bushinlonga with only 260. Bevan Fox accumulating just over 1,200 there. Nathaniel Houghton, about 140, 241 for Kevin Kardash. And for the final three candidates there, Bob Pierce picking up 1,034 votes. He received about 127 the last time he ran for council in 2020. Sean Sparvier picking up about 313 votes, and Rod Williams with just over 1,100 votes there as well. Should also mention that the Regina Council results are just flipping between about 42 of 43 or 41 or 42 of 43 polls reporting, but we do know it's looking like about 8 out of 10 council seats will be served by new councillors as we go into this next term. Very quickly, gentlemen, we don't have a lot of time. Andrew Stevens, John Finduro, it's been a long night. Andrew, I actually want to ask, what is next for you now that you are leaving council?
Oh, nothing. It's great.
Your freedom is back.
I have a wonderful job as a professor at the U of R. I've kind of rekindled my love affair with teaching, so I'm going to be focused on that and some different research projects. For now, that's perfectly fine, but maybe there's a board out there that needs a member. So yeah, that's it for now.
Okay, and John, what about you?
Same, just, I mean, the stress of council and the reading and all that, it's to the side. So I have a full-time job with Dilawri Automotive Group as an inside service manager. So I'm looking to, jump in on a full-time base and concentrate on the job at hand. I'm employed, so I have a job. So no distraction on the council, because it was at the full-time. We talked about the full-time. It's a difficult mix to have a full-time job, both of us, and try to then do some politics at the city hall. So, and then looking after my family, my wife, right? Just spend some, and just do some chores around the house. I think we should be excited to hear that, right? So just looking forward to some of the. I don't have to. When I go to the store, I'm not going to have to be standing aisle 7 at Co-op and do business, right? And
answering your phone at 2 in the morning, as you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's going to be different. Yeah. It's it's going to be different, definitely. When my Wednesday suit for executive, right?
Yes.
It's not going to be coming out of that. It'll be different suit I'm putting on going, or my jeans, whatever. So.
But first, a long sleep, right, for both of you?
Yes.
Yes, after a long night of election results. Andrew Stevens, John Findura, thank you both so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you. It was great.
All right. And that is it for us tonight. You've cast your ballot, you've seen the results, and now mayors, councils, and school boards across this province will get to work, some with a lot of fresh faces, as you've seen. That will do it for Saskatchewan Decides 2024. For the latest on races across the province, you can always head to our websites, cbc.ca/sask and /Saskatoon. Latest video content, always on our CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel. And you can tune in for further analysis tomorrow morning on the Morning Edition and Saskatoon Morning on CBC Radio 1. Or the CBC Listen app that is starting at 6 a.m. Thank you for being a part of this long, crazy ride tonight. For everyone part of the Sask Decides 2024 crew, I'm Ethan Williams in Regina. Have a great night.